It is 7:01 p.m. and this is the regular meeting of the Kaneland Board of Education. We'd like to inform all board meeting attendees that this meeting is being live streamed and archived for access at any time by our community members on the internet within 24 to 48 hours of the meeting's conclusion. Mr. McCauley, will you please lead us in the pledge?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And a roll call, please.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Here.
Mr. Mankivsky.
Here.
Mr. Kleisner.
Here.
Mr. Cook.
Here.
Dr. Lawler.
Here.
Mr. McCauley.
Here.
Mrs. Simmons. Here.
All right. With 7 members present, we do have a quorum. Is there anything the board would like to move from consent agenda to new business?
Yes, I'd like to move H9, approval of amended board policy 6230 to new business.
Okay. Now you're gonna have to refresh me again. We need a consensus, or we can just move it?
We can move it and it becomes J4.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and move H9 from the consent agenda to now J4. So, yeah, and then everything will just, actually there's no shifting, it'll just be tacked onto the end. Okay. At this time then I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
So move.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Kleisner.
Aye.
Mrs. Simmons.
Aye.
Mr. Cook.
Aye.
Mr. McCauley.
Aye.
Dr. Lawler.
Aye.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Aye.
Mr. Mankivsky.
Aye.
7-0, the agenda is approved. It's now time for boards and superintendent salutes, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Layden.
Yes, thank you. We don't have any formal salutes with certificates, but did want to take a moment just to share a note of appreciation for our district departments. 2 weeks ago, when we did have the tornadoes that came through parts of our district, we had a couple of our buildings that were impacted, and several departments acted right away and were able to get out and get things updated, changed, fixed, and repaired within about a day or day and a half. So appreciative for them for that, for the safety of our buildings. And then also at our next meeting, our first meeting in April, we'll have our winter athletics and activities for both middle school and high school here presented. So that's always a fun meeting. That's all we had for salutes, or all I have for salutes.
Okay, Dr. Fuchs? Tonight. Okay. Since we don't have anyone special here to salute, then I'm gonna skip the normal narrative, but just remind everybody that it's an open meeting and you're welcome to come and go as you please. So don't feel bad if you have to leave for whatever reason. Okay, tonight's consent agenda contains the following items. Contains the following informational items, or tonight's consent agenda contains the following information. Sorry. 1, approval of parameters for accounts payable and payroll, March 2024. Approval of the treasurer's report, February 2024. Approval of minutes of the February 26, 2024 regular meeting. Approval of personnel. Approval of destruction of audio recordings from closed session meetings from September 2022. Approval of the IHSA membership. Approval of the Board of Education art purchase for 2023-2024. Approval of the joint agreement for the Fox Valley Career Center. Approval of accounts payable, correction to the February 26, 2024 report. And the following informational items: the student suspension data report and the field trip notification. At this time, I will now entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda items listed. Second. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Simmons.
Aye.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Aye.
Mr. Cook.
Aye.
Mr. McCauley.
Aye.
Dr. Lawler.
Aye.
Mr. Mankivsky.
Aye.
Mr. Kleisner.
Okay, the consent agenda is approved by a 7-0 vote. All right, we'll push forward to the public comments portion of the meeting. Just a reminder, we use the public comment section as an opportunity to listen to our stakeholders. The board does not debate or engage in conversation during this time. I'd like to remind everybody to state your name and village of residence for the record. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes or less. Public comment is a maximum of 30 minutes with a 20-minute total length of time for any one subject. Those who speak are asked to maintain a tone of courtesy and civility. And all right, first up, Mr. Stalkup.
Scott Svalkup. I have 3 kids in the district from Sugar Grove, and I know it's on the agenda for a vote tonight. I read some of the information on it, and I just want to acknowledge that you guys are doing what's fiscally responsible in the best interest of the entire district, not just a small group of students. While Kipla might be helping those students, and that's a wonderful thing. I don't want to discredit that at all, but you were elected to represent all of the district, not just a select few of the districts. So I just wanted to acknowledge that and appreciate you guys acting in that way. Especially knowing that we got a referendum coming that's going to be hard to pass, and showing that fiscal responsibility, I think, is going to be important in that.
Thank you for your comments. Next up, Tonya Grosinger. Just
Just joking. So Tonya Grosinger from Maple Park with 2 kids in the district, almost 3 next year. I just wanted to discuss Kipla really quick, whatever my personal feelings are on the matter and how I think of it in a fiscal responsibility, which I've made known to board members and stuff. I do want to say, I think it's a shame as to how everything has unfolded, especially for the families affected by, or in Kipla. I don't agree with them getting the same email the rest of the district got when being told that there's not going to be a 9th grade next year. I think that was a really poor choice of action on the district's part. I don't know if that was a board decision or administration decision, but however, I feel for these families. They should have never been led to believe that no matter what the circumstances, that 9th grade would be there. I know quite a few of them personally that I have spoken with that have said they never got the impression that if the students weren't there, if the bodies weren't there, it was never going to go through. So that leads me to believe, and again, these are many different families that I've spoken with, that leads me to believe that whatever they were told, they were led to believe that this was going to happen for them. And again, my personal feelings aside, especially on the financial aspect of it, it was handled very, very poorly from the district. And I want to say publicly that I feel for all of you who are affected by this. So thank you.
thank you for your comments. Okay, next up, Ralph Drendel.
This is a 5.5-minute version.
Thank you.
I've been known to talk a little bit. My name is Ralph Drendel. I'm a 68 graduate of Kaneland High School, former teacher, athletic director, head track coach, and taxpayer for the past 38 years. I'm here to discuss our track, which was built in 1976 and resurfaced in 1985 and 1997. It has not been done in the past 27 years, even though recommended maintenance requires resurfacing every 10 years. Beginning in 2012, our coach as an athletic director began the process of requesting to have the track resurfaced. At that point, the surface was 16 years old. It was included in the capital improvement plans in 2013, 2016, 2019, and 2023. Every time the district has chosen to patch the deteriorating surface instead of resurfacing, claiming that patching is a viable solution. On July 24th, 2023, there was a memorandum regarding the decision to fund either the parking lot or the track. The recommendation was once again to deny resurfacing the track. Here's the note, and I quote, approximately $30,000 of repairs are being made to the track this summer, which should help us for 2 to 3 years. So you approved more patching, and now 7 months later, one of our athletes practicing the hurdles caught his spike in the track, fell, and broke his hand. Now our track is no longer deemed safe for competition. We can no longer host any meets on our home track. This was all preventable if you have just followed the basic maintenance protocol in 2013, 16, 19, and 23. But once again, you decided our student athlete safety wasn't a priority. The fact that Kaneland High School has to ask other schools to host our meets is an embarrassment. For the past 11 years, our coaches have been requesting only the basic maintenance. To resurface the existing track is as it is, and now you have injured an athlete and a track unfit for competition. This is on you. In reality, the track should have been resurfaced in 2013 and 2023. My first reaction was embarrassment, until I remembered in 2018, at the January 29th meeting of the school board, you approved the resurfacing of Harder Middle School track at the cost of $68,497. The middle school track was built in 2009. How in the world did a 9-year-old track get a priority over a track that hadn't been done since 1997, which is 21 years? Another quote from July 24th, 2023 memorandum. Do we wait till we have the money, which is a referendum possibility, to build the track the way the high school desires? I have 2 problems with this quote. The high school simply wants a usable track with a safe surface, and implying that we need to tie this whole thing to a referendum is irresponsible. Isn't this a life safety issue? 30 seconds.
Please finish up. Yeah.
I'm at a loss for words that Kaneland High School has to beg other schools to host our big invitational, named for Bruce Peterson. Heck, the complex is named after him. We can't even host his meet in his stadium. This is not the nice way. We got to do better.
Thank you for your comments. Okay, next up, Laura Ekstrom. Or Lara.
Hi, my name's Lara Ekstrom. I live in the village of Virgil. You all have heard me talk about KIPLA several times, and I just wanted to address one small piece. I've noticed that both the district and other community members have used a percent of students when talking about KIPLA and the reasons not to fund KIPLA. And I just wanted to address the fact that I believe that that is a very slippery slope to start down. If we start talking about only being 2% of the district, and the 9th grade class being 17 students, only being 0.43% of the school district, I think we're gonna kind of put ourselves in a bad spot where we are trying to decide when things should be funded and when things shouldn't with a percentage of district students. So I put together a couple of quick percentages for you. So the KIPLA 9th grade class, 0.43% of all district students. And then if we take that as just the same class size, so our current 8th grade students, we're at 5% of the 8th grade class for next year. Assuming that there's no additional students that get enrolled in KIPLA, if we take the numbers that we would have in 9th through 12th grade, the first year that it would be 9th through 12th grade, so that'd be 4 years from now, we would be at 70 students. And again, this is assuming no additional students are enrolled in KIPLA during those 4 years. We'd have 1.8% of the district and 6% of all high school students just in the KIPLA high school program. To compare that to other programs, which I will preface by saying that I support all these programs that this program that I'm going to compare to, but our high school football team had 56 members on the football team. That's 1.4% of the whole district and 4.4% of the high school. So why would we not fund a school for educational purposes, but fund an athletic program that isn't necessarily necessary? Again, I support the football team. I'm not saying I don't, but we're running down a slippery slope when we start using percentages as comparison, and I just wanted to point that out. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your comments. Okay, next up, Catherine Soderstrom.
Good evening. My name is Catherine Soderstrom, and I've recently been speaking at the Kaneland Board of Education meeting starting in January 2024 regarding the expansion of Ignite Academy, also known as KIPLA. I have a child enrolled in 3rd grade at KIPLA and am a current resident of Elbert. During the January and February 2024 meetings, I have provided 3 formal public comments in support of the KIPLA expansion from 3 different professional and academic perspectives. Each of my public comments has looked at the existence and expansion of the KIPLA program as an educational asset and investment to the Kaneland community and our school district. Additionally, I want to address two public comments made by a Kaneland School District resident during February 2024 meetings using the statement, "The students attending KIPLA only represent 2% of the district," and similar comments implying public education funds concerned for the program and the expansion should not be used for only 2% of the district population. I disagree with the approach being used as a motivator behind the statements such as these, and note similar comments and justifications should be evaluated carefully. The Kaneland School District will be treading a very slippery slope if program funding justification is directly linked to the percentage of students utilizing the program. For example, not all students participate in athletics, not all students study abroad, not all students participate in Fox Valley Career Center services. All of these programs are district educational assets, not solely funded by participants, and yet the district agrees to fund the salaries, operational spaces, and the transportation of the program coaches, educators, chaperones, and career service educators. On March 8th, using the agenda for tonight's Board of Education meetings, I was able to review the Kaneland District admin presentation regarding the KIPLA High School expansion, and was disappointed to see that the admin had also used percentage data to justify a lack of planned commitment and rollout for the stated high school expansion in fiscal year 2024-2025. Even more so that when reviewing the data numbers are misrepresented, using the entire population of the school district versus eligible grade levels and student population data from those grades. When this data is calculated correctly, using current student population numbers in 9th through 12th grades at Kaneland High School from fiscal year 2023-2024 documents, and with existing KIPLA program numbers from the current 5th through 8th grades, the percentage of eligible students for the full KIPLA high school expansion rivals numbers of around 6% of the population. To bring this into perspective, this is also similar in percentage to the amount of students who participate in Kaneland High School football and Kaneland High School track out of the eligible grade restricted populations. Justification is not present to overlook the size of the KIPLA expansion population. The personalized learning education modality incorporated into the KIPLA program is not an elective. That should be run on based on an annual percentage of interest. This educational modality is a commitment and investment to Kaneland student education, and the goal has been stated to incorporate this modality into the existing high school program. I also have 30 seconds. Promise. But with what specialty trained high school level educators to lead the way? The personalized learning program was developed over the last 5 years as part of the Kaneland Connect strategic plan. The staffing, building space, and costs associated with the high school expansion are not new to the administration. Kaneland KIPLA parents are requesting the Board of Education support the expansion of KIPLA and direct the admin to advance the program development, and direct the admin to present a concrete plan for high school rollout over the next 4 years to account for 9th to 12th grade expansion. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Okay, next up, Ronan Moreno.
It's Rona Moreno. I'm 12 years old. I am in 7th grade at KIPLA. I am a Howard student. I was at Harder last year, and when I heard about the academy, I didn't really want to go at first. I was forced to go. I was a little bit upset about it, but then when I got there, I enjoyed it, and I still do, and I want to be able to stay. I feel like if I stay there for high school, I will learn better because it has already helped me this year. It has helped with my ADHD because I feel like I can be myself and learn better. I got to learn about the things I like, feel like I have 2 homes ever since I got to KIPLA. I think that 8th graders deserve to stay for high school because it is a better learning environment for us. I hope that when I get to high school, I will be able to stay and learn at KIPLA. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments. Okay, next up, Perry Elliott.
Hi, my name is Perry Elliott. I'm a resident of Sugar Grove. And I know that over the last couple of meetings, you guys have been discussing the TIF proposal from Crown. I wasn't able to attend those meetings, but I've been opposing the TIF since 2019, been heavily involved with the village of Sugar Grove in that opposition. And I don't know, I assume you know what all of your options are, but as a school district, you have many options. Matter of fact, you probably have the heaviest potential impact on this TIF with 70% of the revenues coming to you guys. Currently, the TIF is, Crown wants to structure this with a 90-10 split, which means 90% goes to them initially until they get their payback, which they're assuming is going to be 15 years. 10% going to the rest of, well, actually the village of Sugar Grove. And always it's about the money. If they push this through, you guys probably won't see any dollars till year 4 of this. And that's based on the assumption that Sugar Grove is going to release those TIF funds back into the tax-paying body system, and you'll get some money that way. But the downside is nobody really knows when that's going to happen, how much Sugar Grove is going to release. And if this TIF runs the full 23 years with present value cost of money, you will be getting about half of the money that you would get if you were getting it on an annual basis based on a normal build-out process. So there's a lot of things that you need to look at. There's a lot of problems with this TIF, from unintended consequences to bringing in outside students, which may be culturally different. I don't know, that's not an issue, but there's a lot of unknowns in what's gonna be potentially happening with this. There's gonna be impact on the entire zone with the traffic. I know they're talking about 712 truck trips per day once the warehouses get up coming off of CV Road. They're talking about widening 47. They're talking about a lot of additional money, and also there's going to be consequences within Elburn, within the local surrounding communities, with increased costs that aren't delineated in any way, shape, or form yet. You do have power to fight this thing. There was an Illinois Supreme Court decision that supported the school board of Richmond School District number 88A versus the city of Crest Hill in their TIF based on a contiguous issue with the TIF. May I have 30 seconds? I guess that's the process. That's the process here. They don't do it at Sugar Grove, but that's fine. So, I've got a lot of data, a lot of facts, figures, and reasons why you don't have to accept this. But I can't do it in 3 minutes and 30 seconds. So I would offer to meet with you individually or as a group or whatever, and maybe part some more information to you to let you get a little more insight into what you can do about this. I know Jen Conan was here a couple of meetings ago saying that you were going to get maybe $16,000 per student when new students come in with the TIF. That's a tricky formula that you have to look at. So I'm just saying there's a lot of ambiguity to this thing. And I'm just talking to school districts, not the other communities involved, and the expenses and everything else that's going on. So anyway, give it some thought. I can, maybe you have an email or something, I can email my name and phone number to you if anybody does want to reach out. And if you can give me that, I'll shut up and go home.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Okay, so it was my error to allow the extra 30 seconds because as a matter of fairness, then you have to give everybody 30 seconds. So
All right, thank you.
if you all don't mind, we'll stick to the 3 minutes and just keep it fair across the board, regardless of what the topic is. And again, I apologize. I don't mean to treat one person one way and another person another way. So that being said, let's move forward to new business. So the first item of new business is the approval of the resolutions authorizing reduction in force and honorable dismissal of non-tenured teachers. Dr. Layton.
Yep, thank you for that. As you know, this is March is when we do our staffing plan and related staffing items that are a part of that. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Atkins for J1, and he can walk us through the first item as part of the process.
Thank you. As Dr. Layden said, this is the point in the year where we start looking forward to solidifying plans for the following year. I'd want to take a minute both for well, for all three action items tonight, and just thank a variety of administrators, cabinet members, community members, staff that have helped put information together, problem solve, troubleshoot various things, from scheduling to staffing, you name it. It takes a lot of work, and it's a very intricate and involved process. So the first part of that process is this resolution. Each year, we look at our numbers and roll them up and look at registrations and course selections and all that. At the high school this year, our course selections, as you'll see in the minimum staffing plan, require less CTE courses. Because of that, we do need to decrease the number of staff in the CTE department. However, under the law, with the sequence of honorable dismissal and the Performance Evaluation Reform Act, we put teachers each year into tiers, groups, based on their longevity within the district and the average of their last 3 performance ratings. When we look at that list, the least senior CTE teacher is certified in social studies, and one of our first-year teachers is a social studies teacher only. And unfortunately, we do have to recommend them the reduction in force and the honorable dismissal of Mr. Farrell. I want to make sure that the board is abundantly clear. This is what's called an honorable dismissal. Mr. Farrell's an excellent teacher. We very much enjoyed having him here and want him to stay here. However, the confluence of registration, enrollment, students, course selection, scheduling, all that, he is subject to that and that alone. This is not evaluative. This is not performance-based in any way, shape, or form. This is just the confluence of all those other factors. Anybody who's riffed honorably from the school district has recall rights for the course of a year. So if there were ever a need to increase our social studies allotment at the high school through any of those other things, enrollment, registration, course selection, whatever, the position would not even be posted. It would be offered back to the riffed employee first. They have right of first refusal, if you will. If they choose not to be recalled, then that's a different story. And then we also have, I've met personally with the affected teacher. We've talked about looking forward to next year, how we can help network, how we can help with job placement, those kinds of things. So a good educator who is subject to not enough course load, essentially. So it's unfortunate, it's part of the process, and so I thank the board for listening to that and accepting the motion to honorably reduce Mr. Farrell.
So to be clear, when you say recall rights for 1 year, at this time next year, when we go through the staffing plan again, if there would be a change, that 1 year could apply and Mr. Farrell could come back to Kaneland.
Timing would be important there, but potentially yes.
Thank you.
Any questions, discussion? Probably my least favorite part of this role, for sure, but yeah. Okay, no further discussion. At this time, I'll entertain a motion that the Board of Education approves the resolutions authorizing reduction in force and honorable dismissal of non-tenured teachers.
So moved.
Second. Roll call, please.
Mr. Cook?
Aye.
Mr. McCauley?
Aye.
Dr. Lawler?
Aye.
Mr. Mankowski?
Aye.
Mr. Kleisner?
Aye.
Mrs. Simmons?
Aye.
Mr. Gonzalez?
Aye. Motion carries 7-0. The resolutions authorizing reduction in force and honorable dismissal of non-tenured teachers is approved. Thank you. The second item of new business is the approval of the minimum staffing plan for the 2024-2025 school year.
Yep, turn it back over. Thank you for
Turn
that.
it-
Turn it back over to Dr. Atkins. Also, as he shared a note of appreciation for the building of the staffing plan, I'd also like to do the same. There's a lot of time, effort, energy that goes into reviewing staffing, reviewing numbers, course selections to get to this point. So also an appreciation of all of our staff and administrators that work to get to this point for this preparation. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, so we'll get into the minimum staffing plan. A couple of things to keep in the back of your mind as we go through this presentation. First of all, this is a minimum staffing plan. So the board would want to know that starting next week, we will keep a running enrollment at all of our grade levels. I want to proactively thank our 12-month secretaries at our sites for doing that and compiling that data on a weekly basis for us because we will be monitoring all of our sections, all of our grade levels, all of our registrations and enrollments to make sure that should the need come to add additional staff, that we would do that. The board may recall that over the years, sometime midsummer to end of summer, we may have to add a special education teacher, another grade level teacher, something like that, depending on those variables. And so please know that we monitor that. Please know that we look at that on a regular basis. Please know that we update the association on a regular basis about how those numbers are looking. And that should any needs present themselves, we will bring them here for approval and discussion. So that's one piece. The other piece that I'd share with you is that registration, enrollment, those changes don't come neatly. So for example, you'll see some very large 10,000-foot view perspectives from me tonight. For example, elementary may go up or down 20 students. That does not necessarily equal one teacher, okay? Because that might be a student here, a student there, and spread across 6 grade levels at 4 buildings, that may be a negligible impact, okay? As we go through this, keep in mind that there's also a difference between FTE, full-time equivalency, and the number of staff that we may actually have in terms of bodies. So for example, 2 people could share one FTE, maybe half and half, maybe 60-40, something like that. So the number of bodies that we have on our rolls compared to the number of FTE may not be the same number, but tonight we'll jump back and forth between those in some places, and I'll make sure that I point them out if and when we do, okay? All right, so there's a couple of assumptions that we use when we're doing our staffing. The first being the recommended class sizes that we've agreed to with our association. So these are recommended class sizes, they're not hard caps. We do our best to adhere to these as much as humanly possible. You will always have some variance. For example, you might have an accelerated class with an AP course with seniors at the high school that has less students, but a freshman course that might be at the 26 mark or 27 mark, that kind of thing. We take a look at this and we incorporate a variety of inputs. Our grade span FTE for certified staff is projected to increase by 1.5 FTE. Okay, so you'll see in here additional FTE, but the grade span, so teachers, okay, will increase by 1.5 FTE. Any additional changes that we would be looking at have a variety of limiters to them, everything from available classes, sections, etc. So we may get a handful of students for a certain type of programming, but we may have existing staff that can absorb those. But again, if we have anywhere we need to add staff, we would bring that to you guys. We look at our special education requirements from the state, because there are some things that are hard caps. We can't go over certain numbers for certain populations, so we make sure that we accommodate for that. And then these projections are based on a snapshot in time. That's another thing that's difficult with doing this at this point in the year, is that we have to look at enrollment numbers today. So there are some different pieces that I'll point out specifically, for example, with early childhood and kindergarten enrollments. So we'll talk about those in a minute. A couple of overall pieces. I give you some longitudinal information here about the number of FTE and where we're at the last couple of years. We are projected to increase that 1.5 FTE for this coming year. These changes don't come in pockets. We talked about that. So again, that 20 students at the elementary level example, that doesn't mean plus or minus 1 FTE exactly. But if you get 5 or 6 kids in a grade level at a building, it might mean an increase in the staff. Okay. Fox Valley Career Center, kindergarten, and early childhood are still tentative. We have 10 years of data that we look back at when we look at kindergarten. So we run our kindergarten enrollment registration day on a Saturday. We usually get X number of kids, and then Dr. Fuchs is able to help us with a look back, and we know that we typically get X percentage more that come in that couldn't make it on that Saturday, that move into the area. And so we have some very good and very accurate projection data that we use based on local numbers to help us predict what kindergarten is going to look like. Same thing with early childhood. We typically start early childhood classes a little low because we always have those 3-year-olds that come to us that we have to provide services for. so that the board, if you don't know, early childhood is a programmatic offering that we have for 3 through 5-year-old students. And we are obligated to do what's called child find. We have to proactively go out and seek students with disabilities to offer them early childhood programming. And then the day they turn 3, they're eligible to start coming to our school. So let's see, where are we at? Special education. We have special education increasing at the elementary level by 36 students, the middle school by 19 students, and then the high school is decreasing by 8 students. The elementary and high school components are pretty typical things that you would see. Students come to us to start their educational experience, and we are learning about them, and as we do, some of those students are entitled for services. It's also typical to see students drop off of the rolls, come to the high school, because what we are doing with them is then becoming effective, and they are no longer needing our services. Early childhood through 5th grade enrollment is projected to increase by 30 students. So again, a good example of that total number doesn't necessarily equal 1.5 teachers, because some of those students are spread out. However, some of those students are also going to be clustered in early childhood. We've had a significant number of increase of students who need those services for early childhood. So we'll talk about that more when we get to the elementary level. 6-8 is going to see a decrease of 18 students. The high school is going to see a decrease of 12 students. Kipla, we're anticipating to stay flat at 100 students, Kipla 3-8. And we do have the one FTE that was reduced in force from the high school that we've already talked about. Any questions so far? Okay. Enrollment projections. So we give you a couple years of longitudinal data here so that you can see kind of that overall pattern. We decreased for a number of years and we're staying relatively flat this year. You can see that the early childhood cohort, we're going to be adding another AM/PM section because of the number of students that we have that are entitled for services. So that would be 10 students in the morning, 10 students in the afternoon for those self-contained special education early childhood classes. That's a mouthful, sorry. But for the most part, we have some shifting amongst the levels, but the overall student enrollment is staying flat. We share with the board elementary class sizes. That's typically a frequently asked question, so we want to give you these averages. I want to make an important distinction here because you'll see different class sizes reported by the state. One set of class sizes is typically very, very low, and that's because the state will take the total enrollment of a school divided by all the certified staff in the school, whether they have a class or not. So special ed teachers, social workers, psychologists, that kind of thing. This number represents the actual number of kindergarten through 5th grade sections divided by the number of kids. Okay, so this is a more accurate class size representation for our elementary grade levels. And you'll see that next year we have some very healthy class sizes. Of course, there's going to be a few that might be at the 22 or at the 24, but we watch those, and those will be ones that the running enrollment we keep from our 12-month secretaries coming this spring help us with. Because if we get those 3 or 4 extra kids, 5 or 6 kids at that grade level at that site, we would bring back the recommendation and the information to the board to approve another allotment of FTE for that. Okay. So any questions on the average class size at the elementary? All right. This is really small, so I apologize. We got to try to get it all in one sheet here. This shows you by grade where we're at with our FTE. I would point out to you the increase of the early childhood section. We have some shuffling, so down 2, up 1, that kind of thing from one grade level to the next, because it's natural to assume at a building, if you have 3 first grade teachers, when those students move to second grade who may have had 4 teachers the year prior, 4 classes, will now only need 3. And so there's that shuffling that occurs. You'll see an increase of special education teachers at the elementary level. 3 special education teachers, additional special education teachers are needed. Those are based on IEPs. We've had board members in the past ask, is this a want to or a must to do? These are must do's. The special education services that we have to provide are legal requirements. And then you'll see an additional 0.5 for social work. That would be for the early childhood sections that we're adding. With the number of early childhood sections that we have now, we do need that additional social work support. Okay. Questions there? Kipla again is anticipated to stay right at about 100 students. So the staffing that we have for 3-8 right now is just where we need it to be.
I have a quick question regarding the EC, the increase. So I know some parents pay for EC if they're not entitled to the services. That revenue driven from, or the revenue taken in from those students, does that impact the net overall on the numbers? Does that make sense? So is it offsetting by any means, or is it so minimal?
I'll let Dr. Fuchs speak to the
I fumbled all over my words
recruitment
there.
of what we get from special education versus blended community.
Is it mostly kids that are entitled to services that we have to provide, or do we?
That is correct.
Okay.
They don't pay.
Okay.
So, and then it's the blended kids that do pay for the services, for the education at that level. And it does not offset. I'd have to look for the percentage. It depends each year on how many we have. And maybe, Mrs. Eggleston, can you do anything? I know. So I'm
It sounds
sorry.
like it's minimal.
We can look it up and we can get you the information, but I don't have it at the top of my head.
Okay.
We have all the data.
Sure.
All right, middle school. Middle school, we are remaining essentially flat. We will be increasing one special education teacher at the middle school again. That's a have to due to student IEPs and services that need to be provided. You'll see that we have some information up there about 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, with 7th grade getting an additional section and 8th grade losing a section. That's still to be determined because of registration and class scheduling. It may, what I can tell the board is that we will have 11, 11, and 10. Whether it's the 10 is in 8th grade or 7th grade is still being looked at in terms of the scheduling. So that's a big lever for the middle school right now, and they'll be navigating that. But the overall FTE for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade will not be changing. It's just what between those two grade levels, whether the 10 section grade will be at 7th or at 8th, and that's something Mr. Faulkner is working on at the moment. So, as far as the board's work to allot the FTE, it's a negligible impact. It's just side information. Okay. Any questions on the middle school? Yeah.
How many administrators are we budgeting for middle school?
The middle school has the principal, 2 assistant principals, and a dean.
So that is 1 administrator per how many students?
800, so 300 to 800. 200 to 1 is about the average. It should be looking at 20, somewhere in there. So we're right in there. High school. High school deals a lot with some tents. So for the board's parlance, please know that 1 class taught all year is the equivalent of 0.2 FTE. Okay, so if you see like a 0.1 increase, know that's like a semester 1 period class. So we're talking that small, that fractional of a teaching assignment. But you'll see some ups and downs there. You'll see a decrease in the number of English sections that we need. You'll see a decrease in the CTE that we need. And then you'll see a decrease in the social work that we need for next year. So that's where those 3 FTE decrease come from, but then they are offset in part by other increases. So, any questions there? All right. So that overall recommendation, we always align our FTE allotments to what we need for sections, for class enrollments, for IEP requirements, those kinds of things. We do have an addition of 1 administrator for KIPLA. So I want to pause real quick and talk a little bit about that. KIPLA is a 3-8 building, does not have a psychologist, does not have an MTSS coordinator, does not have the amount of MTSS interventionists that our elementaries do. Yes, they're a 4th the size, but they also have a significantly lesser amount of support services. So I have to tip my hat to Mrs. Garland for balancing being the district personalized learning coordinator and the KIPLA 3.8 principal. And separate from a discussion we'll have with the next business item about 912, KIPLA 3.8 needs a principal. They need a principal that can dedicate all their time, all their attention, and all their focus to KIPLA. I don't know how Mrs. Garland has done it to date. She's done a wonderful job of that to date, but we need to have that FTE so that someone can dedicate that complete time. Being a smaller sized school, we feel that the principal can then absorb the roles that would be otherwise taken on by some of those other support staff at our other elementaries. So we're hopeful that someone that can focus all their time as the educational leader at KIPLA will be able to pick up all the pieces that we have been trying to juggle. So again, thank you to Mrs. Garland, but that's something that's in there as well as part of our recommendation for tonight. So we listed some of those things that all of our elementaries, middle schools, and high schools have: behavior facilitators, instructional coaches, co-teachers, ELL services, counselors. Those are all things that all of our sites except for KIPLA have. And so we do need that administrator there to provide and fill in for some of those services. Another piece that's not in here because it's not part of the certified programming, but it is part of our staffing overall, is about maintenance. It's important to know all the way back to when this building opened, however many years ago, we knew we needed additional maintenance staff. But we've deferred that over the years. We've deferred it. As we have older facilities that require more maintenance, we can no longer defer having that additional maintenance personnel. We need that additional person to be able to keep all of our heating, air, lights, everything else operational. We don't have the manpower, womanpower at the moment to keep the facilities running the way that we would like to, that we need to. And so we are recommending that. It's not tied to the instructional side, but if the lights aren't on, the instruction's going to be hard. So I don't mean to oversell it, but at the same time, it is something that we've discussed for many, many years, and we're in dire need of. Mr. Payton needs help.
And it's a function of the age of the buildings.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So here we kind of see that total certified and then also support staff component. You can see the certified staff that we talked about. The support staff is represented in that next row. That would include the increase of the maintenance person, but then also we are in the initial phases of looking at our support staff, i.e. our paraprofessional support, and we will be bringing that back. We always bring that back in April. We do this part first, but know that we are looking at not needing as many paraprofessionals next year, and so we'll bring more information about that at a future meeting. But those numbers are represented in there. You see the addition of the KIPLA 3.8 principal listed in there, and then the total FTEs. And so you can see that when we do all the ins and outs of that, next year overall, we would need approximately 3/800ths of an FTE less than what we currently have. I'm going to switch gears real quick and talk about another element of staffing, and that is our differentials and stipends. Every year we go through a process to hear from our stakeholders about programming that might be needed. This year we entertained requests for a set designer and a set builder at the high school, another assistant wrestling coach, an increase to the marching band and assistant marching band director differentials, and then a request for lacrosse head coach and assistant coach at the high school. After looking at all these requests, the administrative team reviewed those, and we are looking at presenting lacrosse and making that officially, after many, many years, an official part of our athletics program. Lacrosse has been present in the area since 2016. It's been part of the high school since 2018 as a sponsor and kids paid to play. And then over the years, the program has continued to grow, has continued to become more embedded in our athletic programming. And so we do want to allocate the head coach stipend and the assistant coach stipend to our athletic roster so that we can formally host this program. I share those pieces with you so that I can come back to this, which is about then the dollars. In there, you'll see the change, the net change at elementary, at the KIPLA 3.8 level, the middle school, the high school, Here's where we add in the non-classroom administrator, the non-classroom maintenance, and then the differentials, so the 2 coaching stipends, for a total net cost at $236,998. The board might recall that when we presented the budget, Dr. Fuchs presented the budget back in the fall. The projections, correct. We projected an additional 5 FTE at $60,000 each for $300,000 total. This staffing plan at the minimum comes in under that projection by about $60-something thousand. I think I wrote it down exactly. $63,000. So, as a minimum staffing plan, should we end up needing to come back for an additional classroom teacher for an elementary or for special ed, even with that additional addition, potentially, we would still be right at the projected staffing that we built into the budget when we projected it at the start of this school year. So any questions on the impact of the budget?
Mr. Kleisner, any questions?
No, thank you.
One of the things that we want to make sure that we do, though, as well, is we talk with the board about all the things that didn't come forward in our minimum staffing plan, because there are quite a number. So part of our process is to go through and we start with the wants and the wishes and the desires, and then we narrow down to the what do we need, and then we look at the balancing all the competing interests, and then we bring forward our best minimum staffing plan to the board for approval. But we want to make sure that we don't overlook, discount all of the needs. And so we bring them to you. This isn't part of the action. You're not taking action on these things that I'm going to share with you in just a second, but we want you to know about them because we want you to know that the needs are met. Okay? So on here, you'll see a whole plethora of things, everything from additional co-teachers at the elementary level to a dedicated counselor for 504s, which is a component of special education, an additional dean of students at the high school, dean secretary, one-on-one staff, MTSS staff at the middle school. We talked about building a CTE portion of the exploratory wheel at the middle school, so potentially CTE teachers. You name it, we wanted to make sure we put it all up here so that the board could see that there are yet many things out there that are needed. But as the administration prioritizes them, that's what we brought forward in the minimum staffing plan. Same thing with differentials and stipends. There's a whole variety of things out there that our kids do, that they're interested in, that they participate in, but we can't bring everything forward. So we wanted to make sure that you saw that these things were on there as well.
Any additional co-teachers that you anticipate might be needed at the high school or middle school, special ed?
We've talked about it at the middle school. We've not talked about it as much at the high school because as part of their actual programming, the board approves the curriculum handbook for the high school, which includes some co-tots. And so it's built into the structure differently than at the elementary and middle school.
Okay. And the additional co-teaching paraprofessionals at the elementary would be special ed?
Program paraprofessionals. And again, these are not being brought forward, but these are part of the conversation that we have, and we want the board to know that they're being discussed. Other questions?
So we came in under budget projection, but we're still adding to the.
It's early.
Yeah.
Dr. Fuchs and I have a phrase, we use the word creep, because every year that FTE allotment is going to creep up. Because we're going to get another couple of kids here that tip us over in a grade level. We're going to have students who become entitled to services that we need another special education teacher for. These things happen. And so it's early. This is why it's a minimum staffing plan. This is the best projected picture I can give you, the snapshot right now, knowing that it will change, but then know that we monitor all those levers that would change. We monitor them on a weekly basis from here through August.
Is there anything on this list? Because what caught my eye is the 504 counselor, the psychologist. Is there a dire need for them right now, like at the high school, middle school?
I would think that anything on here, it has a need behind it, and how dire it is might depend on who you're asking. So if you're asking the assistant principal at the middle school who's working with his teachers, or the assistant principal for special education at the high school who's working with his staff to absorb some of these duties, it probably feels pretty prescient. But when we then step back and look at all of the competing interests across the entire district, it becomes a much more challenging conversation. We cannot do it all. If we had unlimited resources, significant unlimited resources, very big, significant unlimited resources, there might be other things that we bring forward in a minimum staffing plan. We don't have the resources.
The behavior facilitators, were these, refresh my recollection, were these the ones we hired during COVID?
Tail end of COVID. Yep.
Tail end of COVID. Do we have data in terms of their caseloads?
We do have data. They don't have a caseload per se as a special ed teacher would. It's not mandated.
Right.
They do work with some kids.
Student
Primarily,
contact.
though, they work with staff to demonstrate, model, and coach them as to the kinds of strategies they can use within the classroom. They're more of a tier 1, tier 2, brought in for tier 3 behavior interventions as a consult kind of thing. But we do have data. If the board would be interested, we could bring that back. We have brought that data back in the past. So. Any other questions?
Anything else? Going once? Twice? Okay. With no further questions, thank you, Dr. Atkins, for the time and information. I will entertain a motion that the Board of Education approve the minimum staffing plan for, the minimum staffing plan for certified staff for 2024-2025 as presented.
So moved.
Second.
A roll call, please.
Mr. McCauley,
Aye.
Dr. Leller,
Aye.
Mr. Mankivsky,
Aye.
Mr. Kleisner,
Aye.
Mrs. Simmons,
Aye.
Mr. Gonzalez,
Aye.
Mr. Cook.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0. The minimum staffing plan for certified staff for 2024-2025 is approved. Moving on to the third item of new business, the Ignite Academy 9 through 12 expansion recommendation. Dr. Wade.
Yes, thank you. As part of, as we shared at the last meeting, this would come separate from the staffing plan. And so with that, Dr. Atkins has worked with Ignite staff to put the information together and administration to share the following information for board action for tonight, unless there are any other questions. But the plan is to have the discussion, any questions that you might have, and then have action for tonight. Dr. Atkins.
Thank you. So, as Dr. Layden mentioned, the board asked for additional information about the 9-12 KIPLA expansion and what is behind that, some of the costs involved, some of the structure that it might entail, so that you could have that information as we move forward. So, as we've led into next year, we're looking at all the same kinds of things that we looked at for the minimum staffing plan when it came to then recommending KIPLA expanded to 9-12. We had a plan for it to then be expanded each successive year, 9th grade, then 9-10, then 9-10-11, and then 9-10-11-12. As we look at that, KIPLA is an open enrollment environment, okay? So students and families are able to opt into the learning provided by KIPLA. But that in and of itself is one facet that makes it very difficult to project what we are able to do with KIPLA programming in and of itself. If I look at an elementary school that has a defined cohort in 2nd grade, I can very easily roll them up to 3rd grade. Might be plus or minus 1 or 2 kids, 3 or 4 kids, but those changes won't be significant enough to dramatically change the sectioning and allotment. However, when we're dealing with an open enrollment component with the size of the cohort that we have at KIPLA, it's just an added element of difficulty to the projections that we use to determine program viability. So when we designed the high school program, we were looking at 50 students per grade level. That was our hope And our intention was to have 50 students per grade level to then roll that out into 9th and 10th and 11th and 12th grade. Another piece that we embedded into this is that there would be no way to have enough staffing for electives and all of the other coursework to have KIPLA 912 be a standalone environment. Students would have to transition between the high school and KIPLA for a variety of different course offerings. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. When we look at the current snapshot, because we talked about that with the minimum staffing plan, currently we have 12 students at KIPLA in the 8th grade. There were additional 5 students in 8th grade at Harder that expressed interest in the 912 programming. So depending on how you look at it, our students that expressed interests, hard count, not necessarily, but they are nonetheless interested. So that's another element that is challenging for us when we look at whether or not expansion is viable. When we look at comparing the students to the overall resources of the district, I know that there's some different perspectives to be had about using percentages, and I can completely understand that. At the same time, we are a K-12 EC-12, district, and we do need to appropriate our resources across the entirety of the district. So that's just one data point, but we also shared the data point of the number of students that are either in or have expressed interest as it's compared to the number of students that we were targeting for an expansion of the high school program. So we wanted to give that percentage of the students to the 50 kids per cohort, per grade level, so that we can kind of have both ends of that spectrum. When we look at the rollout of the Personalized Learning Academy, we wanted to make sure that we talked about all the various opportunities that we had to talk with families and students, because what was critical here in terms of the timing of this, because I know that was part of our conversation with the board, of the timing of whether the expansion was viable or not, was driven in large part by the ability for our 8th grade students to register at the high school. The high school registration stands alone from what we're doing with KIPLA, and if we had prolonged or protracted the decision for KIPLA and whether or not we would go to 9th grade with KIPLA, those students would have missed out on the opportunity to register. They would ultimately be able to register, but their course offering selection would be potentially limited because all of the other 8th graders would have registered for classes, plus any sophomores who registered for electives that freshmen would be eligible for, and that kind of thing. So there was a clock, if you will, in our minds of being able to provide our families with the opportunity to register for 9th grade along with all of the other incoming 9th graders. So there's a component there. The other piece that we thought of in looking at that, one of the things that we are proud of is that personalized learning isn't confined to just KIPLA. Personalized learning is a district initiative. It's an offshoot of our Kaneland Connects plan. So we do have that growth, that change, that difference, that perspective difference embedded throughout the district. And so we're hopeful that our students who have benefited from that in the 3A setting will still benefit from that in some capacity in the 912 setting, regardless of whether there's a KIPLA 912 separate program or not. When we look at the programmatic structures that we talked about, we wanted to walk you through what it would look like 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. So 9th grade, we would be looking at a combined English humanities block taught by one teacher, and then a STEM block, math and science, taught by a math teacher and a science teacher. That would include an advisory homeroom period. Students would attend the high school for 2 periods to get their electives and their PE in potentially, and then come back to KIPLA for their 2 core blocks, the STEM block and the humanities block. That would require transportation. It would require additional capital outlay for additional classrooms at KMAC. It would require different classroom material, software licensing fees, and food services. So, right, we'd have to expand our food services as well. We talked a little bit in the past about licensing fees. Some are by student, by screen, some are by location, so it depends on which piece of software we're talking about, but there would be some of that cost embedded in there. The minimum cost projections for 9th grade would be about $261,000, and that would be above and beyond the current projected deficit of $1.5 million. This is a sample of what the teacher schedule would look like. So first and second period, students would be at the high school. So teachers would get their plan in first hour, second hour, we could utilize some MTSS supports at Kipla. Then we would have that, the kids would come back, they'd have that advisory homeroom with their teacher. We'd go into the STEM and humanities blocks, they'd have lunch, and then the kids would switch. And then there'd be that supervision at the end of the day to kind of mirror the high school obligations of a high school staff. Student schedule, similar. They'd have their electives at the high school. They'd have their they'd come back, they'd have their advisory, then go into their coursework, their lunch, and then have that PE at the end of the day while the teachers have their supervision period. There are a couple of pieces to consider here. When you have any group of kids loaded into a specific section, it does a couple of things. It narrows the offerings that those kids could take advantage of for their electives. It also lopsides the remaining electives that we can schedule other freshmen for throughout the rest of the day. So there's kind of an impact to the school, the high school, and an impact to the kids when we have to relegate an entire cohort to 1 or 2 periods within a schedule. So it's not insurmountable, but it does have an impact. Subsequent years, we'd add 10th grade, we'd have to start thinking about driver's education and additional PE health sections. We feel that the 3 FTE that we would need for 9th grade would be able to split the kids, and through scheduling, we wouldn't need to add staff for that, but that would only be for 9th and 10th grade then. Those current students, there's 10 at Kipla right now, so we'd be able to absorb the STEM and the humanities block with the existing 3 staff that we would have. But each grade that we add adds yet additional complexity and intricacy to the scheduling between the KHS students and the Kipla 912 students. And that's something that I can't clearly objectify for you today. I just know that in working with Dr. Horn and his team and looking at the impact of potential scheduling, there would be an impact. And again, it's that push-pull of limited course selection with lopsidedness of the remaining sections. So how severe that becomes each year that we go in, that becomes more intricate and more difficult to manage.
Dr. Atkins?
Yeah.
Would an increased student base make it more complex or less complex? Say there are 50 students at that point.
It would make it more complex.
More complex.
Correct. Because there would be more kids vying for a limited amount of electives, and then more kids that would be pulling those electives, taking up, being scheduled into those sections that then relegates the remainder of the cohort into the remainder of the electives, which will lopside those classes further. So it further, more students would exacerbate that further.
Okay.
So can I quickly ask this? I mean, this is not an unknown. What we need is maybe unknown, but when this was being rolled out and planned several years ago, the idea was to go from 3rd to 12th grade, right? So it's not a surprise that there's going to be all these nuances and everything. Administration knew, Kipla staff knew, the high school knew. So there was some kind of insight or some kind of a plan. It's not like it seems like it's being said to us like, oh, if we do this, there's going to be some shakeup and there's all these nuances we just didn't know. But that's not necessarily true, right? It was kind of known that we were going to have to face those things, but that there would be a plan. And so it's not like it's going to totally change up our high school and drastically, and these kids aren't going to get the same, Kipla High School is not going to get the same education as our high school kids that are traditional high school. I know it's not a question. I guess it's a, I guess I just don't like the perspective of the comments of being like, this was not known. I mean, there's been years of people doing research on this, and they've gone to different schools that, you know, there's been nuances in other schools. We're not new. This problem is not new to just Kaneland. You know, yes, maybe we bumped into it because we had a smaller enrollment, but we plan on moving to 9th grade. So there was a plan to make this happen this year. And so I guess I'm a little bit confused of why does it feel like this was an unknown when it wasn't? So I don't know if.
I don't know that the programming itself was an unknown as much as all of the sum total of the context.
Right.
The budget deficit, the competing needs of the district, the competing needs of sections for other things. We're not, I understand.
I know,
what,
I
you
get
know-
that, because
No, I
like, you
understand
can't
what our
predict
community's
the
talking
financial
about,
needs and
right.
stuff like that, but I don't want to get stuck. I'm tired of it just being a financial focus. It's the education of kids, their today, their tomorrow, their future. And the fact that comments are being made that it's going to be a financial, it's at this or that. It's like our track, it's at this or that. Things get pushed back and pushed down the road and stuff like that. And the impact of the kids is more important to me at this point than, obviously, this is not going to sound right, the financial end of it, because financial, obviously, there's other competing needs. On the board, it's my job, I understand that. Read the budgets, go through this, we spend a lot of hours doing this. But the educational, that perspective seems to be getting lost here, that it's something that we can push this down because there's other financial competing needs, but we're pushing down kids down the road that we can't pull back. We can't give them their 9th grade again. If anything, we learned that through COVID. We can't change that experience for them. And so if we're going to take these kids and do this drastic change for them, it's more than the financial need. So I guess that's just my 2 cents, and I completely respect. I know you have to focus on all the needs and the financial and the special eds. There's certain requirements and stuff like that. So.
Do you anticipate any difficulty hiring the STEM teachers?
We would get to that. We have a slide about the additional factors that we've considered, and that is one for sure. We'll talk about that in a few minutes.
And it really would have no impact on special ed numbers district-wide. They would.
District-wide, negligible, if
Yeah,
any.
for 9th grade.
Depending
pretty
on
much,
what, yeah.
Yeah, pretty much, what it is coming through. Okay.
Do you have a question, Mr. Kleisner? I heard the phone.
Oh, no, I was just, I wanted to go back up to the scheduling really quick. So for the teacher schedule, the first period plan, second period MTSS, and then the third period would be, I'm assuming half of the period would be for advisory homeroom, because that's the period they'd be traveling back from the high school, correct?
No, it's advisory homeroom because under our contract, we have committed to 1 homeroom class a week, and then the remaining 4 days of the week are an advisory.
Okay, so is the third period extended then because of the travel time?
I don't know about that per se, because I think we'd be following the high school schedule, which, sorry, I gotta look at my cheat sheet for the high school schedule, is a 30-minute homeroom.
Dr. Atkins, the teachers would not be traveling.
Yeah.
The student travel time would be different.
Mr. Riley, can you come to the mic, please? Thank you.
So the travel time for teachers, they would be housed at Kipla, so there would not be a need to have them leave second period at the high school and come to Kipla. You would have students doing those pieces, but you would run into the benefit of not having a set locked 3rd period, 4th period, 5th period, where just essentially you're looking at that chunk of time from 3rd through 9th period where we would be able to fit that advisory. So we are not bound by the Bell schedule at Kipla, and the teachers would not be traveling, the students would be coming over.
Got it. Thanks for clarifying that. So is there time where these teachers would specifically not really, I know it says plan and MTSS, I mean, are we utilizing these teachers to the full capacity as we would a normal teacher, for the regular school day?
Yes.
Due to the, it would be normal for them? This would be
Yes.
a normal day for a teacher?
Yes, it would be. Currently, our high school teachers teach 5 periods, so that STEM and humanities block would be the equivalent of 2 periods each. So that'd be 4 classes, and then the MTSS period would be the other 5th time frame class, if you will. So yes, they'd have the same teaching load as a high school staff member.
Okay, and then the projected 261,000, that includes the buses and the transit and all that stuff too, the logistics?
For 9th grade, yes.
Okay.
So 11th grade, 12th grade, or the next couple of slides, we get into additional challenges here with specialized programming. So as students are able to step away from general 9th grade English, general, algebra, geometry, and get into more specialized programming, we would not have the resources at KIPLA to have a teacher come and just do one section of one certain type of class. And so we would need to rely on Edgenuity, which is like, if you recall years ago, Edmentum. We talked about Edgenuity as the newer version of that, where kids would be getting those courses through a digital format, remotely. And then the scheduling again would become more and more challenging. And so KIPLA students would have very limited, if any, access to AP courses, dual credit courses, those kinds of things. We would have to add in year 3 additional FTE for the math, science, and humanities. And then we also built in the special ed component there, because at that point, with 3 cohorts there would need to be some sort of special education support, of course. Senior year, same thing, same challenges, more strain on our ability to provide the specific offering to the students at a separate site. Some of those unknowns and challenges, the student enrollment is not solidified, and that is a challenge for us because it's difficult to predict. So the 12 students at KIPLA, the 5 that are interested, that's 17 total students. If you consider them a hard count, like we could for our elementary schools or a middle, 6th grade rolling up to 7th grade, even then that would be challenging, but that number could be less, it could be more. And when we look at allocating district resources to an unknown like that, it's just difficult when put into the same construct as all of the other competing needs of the district. That advanced placement coursework would be a concern. We'd want to make sure that students had access to those programs. Special education needs and services, those fluctuate, they change. It could become more intense, it could become less intense, we don't know. The elective courses chosen by our kids may require additional staffing or work through overloads, but either way, we're looking at a high degree of probability of additional expenditures for that. Counseling services, estimated staffing expenses are budgeted right now at $60,000 per certified staff member, but again, like anything else, that placeholder would change, but that would change for all of our other staffing needs as well across the district. And then additionally, those band and chorus opportunities would be limited to our KIPLA, for our KIPLA students.
Go ahead.
Scheduling, because we don't necessarily always offer it first and second period, right? That doesn't mean that we can't offer a STEM section or a humanities section during first and second period, but at some point they're going to have to be in KIPLA versus at the high school for band and chorus, excuse me. And we just have limitations with that with the scheduling. So
my comment on that, just thinking out loud.
Yeah.
I think a lot of things what you said so far, Dr. Atkins, I keep coming to the same idea that we're comparing a lot of apples to oranges here, because I think we have so many unknowns and so many differences in the way we're talking about this, right? These students might not get to do AP. These students might not get to do chorus. They might not get to do these things. But if they're choosing to go there, then they know that going in, right? They're choosing that part. So I'm not sure we can make the same statement as we're denying them these options. They're choosing to not avail themselves of those options. And then the same is true, I think, when we talk about the finances of it, right? We can certainly go down and say, okay, well, we spend X dollars on this student, X dollars on this student, X dollars on this student. But the problem with that thinking too, I think, is we could try to do that for every single cost. We could do that for, well, it costs us this many minutes of light bulbs to power the room for this student. And we could try to calculate, well, we had this many copies and that's how many dollars we spent on paper for the student. I'm not sure that's a useful data point. I'm not sure it's an accurate data point. And the other problem with that is too is, okay, so we could say, well, these students at KIPLA are going to cost us so much more money because we're going to be dumping $260,000 more into them. Maybe, but maybe not, right? Because maybe they're not availing themselves of a school psychologist who costs us a lot of money and they're at the other place, right? So again, you could do this thing where it's like, well, this student gets the school psychologist, this student doesn't. This student takes an art class, which has a lot of fees attached to it. This student goes to Fox Valley Career Center. When we start doing that, I think that big dollar tag starts to move, right? Because I think we don't say, well, we have all these other dollar tags attached to these other students. We're just focusing on this big one right here because it's new. And the other part of that is, yeah, it might be a big dollar tag the first year, but then there are different dollars associated with the second year of running the program, right? So if it costs us $15,000 to $20,000 a student the first year of running it, but then it flatlines back out to 12 the next year, well, now we're back right in line with all the other students across the district. So I think these are the apples and oranges that we have to grapple with. And I'm not sure we're having a good conversation about that part. So I just want to make that statement.
Would it be fair to say that if you choose to go to Kipla for 9, 10, there are going to be certain electives that by virtue of your choice are just foreclosed? I mean, I remember in high school, because I chose band,
right,
I couldn't do world history. I couldn't do Latin 3, Latin 4. Just, stuff that there are choices to be made, and you don't always get the breadth of the choices that you might otherwise get. As long as students know that coming in, know that these options are foreclosed to you by choosing this.
Mm-hmm.
This is what you choose. That, yeah. I just think we have to make full disclosure that way, that these will be unavailable. And an informed decision, fully informed decision. And it seems like,
Dr. Fuchs, could you discuss the deficit and how that works, how this these type of expenditures would impact the deficit, where the deficit money comes from, when we're short?
Sure. So, at the end of fiscal year 23, we ended with a $1.9 million deficit. When you end with the deficit, the money comes from your fund balance. The district has a fund balance policy that states that we need to have at least 45 days cash on hand at the lowest point of the year. So with that being said, in December, we did our financial projections for the next 5 years, starting with 24-25, which is next school year. Given the assumptions that we put into the model, we're showing a deficit of approximately 1.5 million. We don't think it will be that much because the decisions that we make here help to reduce that. For example, the minimum staffing plan, you mentioned that we're under. Well, tomorrow when you get in, health insurance will go over. It moves up and down all spring as we finalize all of the inputs for next year. But right now, best guess, it's about 1.5 million. At the time that we did the projections, we did not include the 261 for Kipla because administratively, we had already discussed that it wasn't feasible. So to put it in there would have been unnecessary at that time. So at this time, if the board directs the administration to please move forward with Kipla, we would take the 1.5 projected deficit and we would need to add that other 261, which makes it a little bit greater. Does it mean it will land like that? Probably not. But until we know where things are going to land. We can't project any closer. We do know we have some big things coming up. Our initial health insurance renewal was at 9%. We know that they're working hard to bring that down. In the financial projections, we put in 6%, which is a percentage more than previous years. We're trying to get a little closer, but that's a big lever. We spent 7 million. A percentage is 700,000. 700? Yeah. 70,000, sorry. 70. So every percent makes a 5-digit difference with that. We also know that we're negotiating with our unions right now, one of them in particular, the largest, and we don't know where that's going to land. We have some unknowns that if we can control something, we probably should in terms of being conservative. Our fund balance, we are bringing it down because we have significant capital improvements. And as you've heard with the track, we've got parking lots, we've got roofs, we have significant capital needs. And there is only one pot of money. So every year we have to make hard decisions on staffing, capital projects, new programs versus existing programs in terms of trying to balance the budget. If you go back and look at the financial projections, there was a graph near the end, and it goes just like this a little bit. That shows you how we've managed our fund balance over time. And you'll see that we've done a very good job in terms of not spending too much over, not spending too much under, but maintaining, which was the board's directive to the administration for many years, is the money that you get in a school year or a fiscal year, you should use during that year for the students that year, as opposed to, you don't want to save a whole bunch of money, and you certainly don't want to overspend a whole bunch. Both of those situations can get you into trouble. So there's a need to balance.
So to expand on it, and I totally agree with you, and I think I've said this for years, and I think you do a fantastic job of finding that Goldilocks zone. I really do. But we have also had years where we've had deficits and we've had surpluses, right? We've done
That's
this,
right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
And so the question is another, right? So going from a 1.5 to a 1.8, can the fund balance tolerate that kind of slip or deviation? I don't know what the right math word is, but you do, right? So can we still operate? Are we still being fiscally responsible with that additional going from 1.5 to 1.8?
I would say it depends.
Okay.
And it depends on some of the unknowns.
Yeah.
So we can only make decisions based on what we know when we know it. And that's the problem, is this program, we need to make these decisions sooner than later.
Sure.
We're going to hear about the staffing shortly and the difficulty that it could be. We don't know. We may have a person out there, another unknown.
Sure.
For the STEM program that you were asking about. You know, can it handle it? Probably. But what if I'm wrong?
Yeah, no, I know. And
Then I just guided you.
And I agree with that. And I'm not trying to ask you to have a crystal ball and tell me that it's all going to be okay, Aaron. I get that. I do. But if I'm making a pros and cons list, which I've been doing for a while now for this, right? I've been trying to figure this out, right? I think it sounds easy to say, well, this isn't fiscally responsible. Put that in the con. I'm not sure it's that clean, right? And that's where I continue to waffle, is that I think it could still be fiscally responsible, right? We still could be doing fiscally responsible actions. It just puts us a lot more in the gray than more in the black and white, right? And I prefer black and white. It's so much easier. But yeah.
I would agree with that. But I would also agree with that in combination with some of the other challenges.
Sure.
Programmatically that we've discussed with the high school and with the other administrators. when you combine those things together,
Sure.
it makes it even more gray.
Sure, sure. And for the most part, I mean, you are boots on the ground. You're in the middle of it all. So I tend to defer to your decision because I'm looking at it for a couple of weeks in a packet, and I'm making a decision where you're living it daily, right? And I think that that's important. Where I continue to waffle on the other side, though, is I think we're hearing other folks who are also feeling this boots on the ground in the prod of it, and they have a different opinion, and so that's why it continues to go back and forth.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned the surpluses and the deficits of the fund balance, but correct me if I'm wrong, but those surpluses, I mean, right now we're in heavy inflationary times, and costs are only going to go up, right? I mean, I don't see the revenue coming in against the costs going out, and so I get it, but at the same time, and this isn't setting aside $600,000 for theater lighting. That's gonna, once they put it up, it's gonna be in there. This is an ongoing expense.
Some of it, right, but not all 260.
It could, I mean, for as much as it could go up, or for as much as it could go down, it could go up with needs and different.
Oh, and not to be argumentative, but I would say that staffing is usually once we have a contract, that's our most known. Right, that one.
Yes, that would help.
It's the biggest percentage.
Yeah.
Once we have a contract, that's our materials is probably our least now, right? Because that will go up, right?
Yeah.
Right, but staffing is what we know the best. So once we have a contract, we'll know for sure where this will fall.
That's right.
So the challenge is too, like you just said, you project out the next 5 years. So we're gonna have this deficit, this 1.5 every year. So it's going to be different next year. What is that feasibility that's going to make, wow, we can do 9th grade next year. Same things are going to change, or same things, the issues, the nuances, we're still going to have those next year. We have to figure those out. So if we don't commit to this year, what would make different next year be any different? We still have just as many unknowns next year than we do, as we do this year. So what magic can happen that next year with 9th grade, would be, this is what we can do. I mean, if we're not committing to it now and we have this deficit now, we're going to have the deficit next year. I don't know if there's.
And to Adam's point, it's just an inflationary period. It'll just be more expensive.
I get that, but that's not on the back of the kids.
I think you're saying.
Yeah.
that
Oh,
it's
you
gonna
mean
get
the
worse.
chart?
Do it
Okay.
later, then it'll just be more expensive.
Right. So that's my thing too. It's like if things are, yeah, thank you.
I got questions about the slide, so, but I want you to present it, and then I want to kind of give my input.
Mr. Kleiser? Sorry, I think I heard. Mr. Kleiser, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, excuse me. So, real quick, so this is the recommendation from administration based on their experience with this. I'm assuming talking to teachers and everything. Current recommendation is that we do not move forward on grade 9 for KIPLA. That was an administrative decision. This was based on the original pilot program. This is a pilot program, right? We're trying something new. We're trying to see how it works. Originally, when this was discussed, we said we need to be at this 50 student mark to make it viable, to make it make sense to move on to the 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. And so I do think these percentages are important because this, in a sense, this program is an elective, right? You can choose to enroll in it or not. I heard some comments before, people were saying, well, it wasn't promoted and it wasn't out there, it wasn't known. I see the one slide says all the different places it was talked about for the past several months, and I think end of last year. So I feel like it was promoted and talked about. And it seems that there's just a lot of students and a lot of students not interested in moving to KIPLA. Now, I've talked to some families and I've talked to some kids, some other students, and one of the issues that came up was some of the kids that might benefit from it or like the idea of it, while the other schools, elementary schools, and middle school and high school, they're actually having more personalized learning. They're getting more opportunities for this. They're having a lot more opportunity to kind of work at their pace, but also advocate for themselves too. And I know that's the initiative of the entire district. But their one hesitation, I think, with KIPLA, at least that's the responses that I've gotten, is they're not exactly thrilled about leaving their friend group or their school or their classmates to go to a different school. And I think that might be one of the bigger drawbacks for a lot of these students to get these numbers up. the issue that I'm seeing here too is that we have 12 students that are in 8th grade going to 9th grade. The following year, the 7th graders will go to 8th grade, then to 9th grade for 9, 10. It's only 10 students. So out of the 100 students that we were expecting when this was initiated a couple of years ago, we're at 22% of that total. So that's now going to be a $500,000 expense for these 22 students. I'm not to say that the 7th graders might not, get bigger when they go into 8th grade except for next year, but that's a fairly large expense for the 22 students. And again, this is more on the lines of an elective versus, a public school offering, and it's a pilot program, and it's just not hitting the numbers that we're seeing here. So this is something that is a little bit outside of what we're talking about for football. I mean, we just heard about the track that we've been pushing off because we thought it was going to go to referendum and then it was going to get fixed there. It wasn't able to get fixed. $30,000 didn't patch it. And now we actually have a safety concern. And now we have this other thing. And we're telling them, hey, we can't help you guys out if we don't have the money. And that's the truth. I mean, the money's not there. We don't have the capital funds to move forward with this. And we're not talking about $240,000 for just this year. We're talking about $500,000 for the first 2 years of this happening for potentially 22 to 30 students out of the 100 that was expected when this initiated. I think they put this 50 student kind of a cap in there when we initially started this project because that made sense to have that extra FTE. And I don't know how that would work on the scheduling side of things. If we have elective classes that are going all through the day, the high school, our bus is going to be running back and forth. So it does, I see, add intricacies, and this should have been thought about and planned out ahead of time, and I 100% agree with that, and I'm sure it was to a degree. But I think now that we're kind of getting into it, and the other part of it, too, is do the Kipla families and students understand that they might not have access to APs? What if the children do want to do the APs? Then are they going to have to transition back to the high school anyway so they can get enrolled into the AP classes? So these nuances do make a difference. The financials make a huge difference. If we're sitting at $1.9 million deficit, are we going to be close to that 45-day cash on hand necessity, Dr. Fuchs?
Yes. Yes, we are.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
She said yes.
She said yes.
So, like, and that's not just a board initiative of 45 days. Like, that's by accounting law, right? Or state law?
No,
Or standard?
it is definitely board policy, just determined here. Locally.
Is there state law that requires us to keep a certain amount of cash on hand?
No, there's not, but, we do get, dinged on our financial profile score because the state recommends that we keep 25% in fund balance, which is twice the amount that our board policy has.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, when we chose
They,
that
they, right, they suggest 90 days cash on hand, and we selected 45. And we did that through a very lengthy community process where we debated how much is too much, how much is too little, and our board and community landed on 45 days at the time that policy was implemented.
Yeah, thank you for following up on that. So, I mean, what we're saying right now then is for the next 2 years, we have an additional $500,000 spent, I mean, for infrastructure and for just some capital and everything else like that, FTE, across 22 for sure students. And that's $22,000 additional for these students on top of the regular expenses of the rest of the district, which is already putting us at $1.5 million deficit. I think that is significant. Now, my other question is for early childhood, we do actually have like enrollment fees or tuition. I mean, is this something that families or parents would be willing to put up as tuition or a portion of this to help supplement this program? Because again, I think there is a lot of merit, and I think it has its place for sure. But I think the way that it's rolled out and the way where we've gotten into now, where the economy is, where our finances are as a district, the $500,000 is a lot of money when there is additional needs within the district already. High school needs additional repairs. I mean, we saw a list of quite a few different positions that would really need to be filled or like to be filled that would just keep putting off as well. So this is, we have to look at this as a broad scope as well, not just a granular thing. And I totally understand we don't want to let these students down, but at the same time, I don't think anybody, I feel like it's being portrayed that we're just going to throw children out to the wolves and give them no education, no support, no backup whatsoever. And I don't think that's the proper way of positioning this either. That's all I have for right now.
Just to follow up on one of his questions, because I have the same question. Is it possible to have tuition situation where?
I don't believe so. I need to check on it, but I don't believe so.
And the reason there's the fees for the early childhood, because they're getting an extended day above and beyond, correct?
No, because it's not a required program. We're required to provide school for grades K through 12. We're not required to provide early childhood, so that's why we can charge tuition. The reason why we can charge tuition for the extended day kindergarten, which is what I think you're referring to, is because kindergarten is only a half-day mandated program. So our extended day portion is the portion that we're charging tuition for. The mandated part, we can only charge regular reimbursable fees for consumables and things like that.
And just to clarify, for early childhood, there are some early childhood students who have special education IEPs, and we are obligated to provide that program. But then we have community-based early childhood students who were not obligated to provide that services for those services.
And those are the ones that pay, correct?
Have we explored all the grant options? Grant options that are available?
I would say yes. I would say yes, because we have a person for the Kaneland Foundation who has explored a number of grants for a variety of purposes. And with our current level of wealth and lack of low income, we're not eligible for many of the grants that are available.
Over the last 2 years, she sought several grants that would be applicable for Kaneland School District and was able to only secure a few because of what Dr. Fuchs just shared.
Public grants or private grants or both?
Both.
Both. She's been dedicated to looking for grants, seeking grants, applying for grants, and unsuccessful.
So I'll jump in since we haven't got to the last slide. So what would be the cost if, as that first bullet said, students have a personalized homeroom in the high school? What would that budget be? Or would there be one because they're already in the high school? Would you be able to move teachers around to help assist? Would that cut the costs dramatically?
There would be no additional cost.
It would be zero.
Those students are put into a specific personalized homeroom, if you will, because again, like we talked about in the minimum staffing plan, those 17 students would be interspersed amongst all of the other freshmen for their electives and for their core classes. So what you're in net talking about is maybe one more student in this English class, more kids in this math class, so it's negligible. And so there would be no additional cost.
Did you talk about the high school diploma at all? And did you want to?
We did not, and I'd probably have Mr. Rowley speak about the high school diploma piece, because I believe there are some considerations there in terms of where do they get their diploma from? Do they get it from KIPLA, or do they get it from a high school, which is even more complicated when some of their, if I misspeak, when some of their coursework comes from the high school and some of their coursework comes from a personalized learning academy. Which institution is crediting and signing off, if you will, on the high school diploma?
Thank you.
Isn't the diploma given by District 302?
Can you come up to the mic, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick.
Remember that the mic, we can't hear it, but it broadcasts to the internet.
Yes, we have looked at a couple different pieces and a couple different opportunities, but what would make the most sense would that our kids would graduate from Kaneland High School. That's what their diploma would say, be Kaneland 302 at Kaneland High School. We had talked logistically if there was a recognition, a seal for the academy when that time came. There was one more. Transcripts would all be the same. It would all be D302 transcripts. All of those things would be district-wide.
So it's relatively seamless when it comes down to it.
That,
It's,
yes.
it's still a District 302 diploma.
Correct, same graduation ceremony. Yep.
So can you do the, and again, can you do a pilot program? Can you have the ninth graders together? Is there room in the high school where they'd be together rather than like splitting them up, or they can have their personalized learning together? Is there opportunity for that, or do they have to be dispersed?
There could be an opportunity for that. That's why we talk about like the homeroom, to cluster them in a homeroom. As far as clustering them in a STEM block, we don't have that structure at the high school. So we could cluster kids into an English class or into a math class, but then we get some of the challenges of which teacher we're going to have do that and what they're prepared to do. Because part of this that we've yet spoken about is, of course, working out some of the details of the working conditions with our collective bargaining agreement with the union. And that's not to say that they are in no way, shape, or form like the gatekeeper of that. That's not at all what I'm saying. But we do have to legitimately and fairly work out those details. So if I'm teaching a class that is a clustered group of students, am I now a KIPLA teacher? Because we have made the commitment, not only is it open enrollment for students, but it's also choice to enter into for our staff as well. Because not everybody has the preclusions to be able to look at a program like this and say, I'm a good fit for that. So we've made a commitment to our staff to not force a staff member to work there when maybe they don't want to. And so where does this fit in when we start to then cluster kids into my science section when I'm not ready for that as a professional employee? I'm still an excellent employee. I still teach kids very well, but as far as tooling things for those, for that personalized learning environment solely, that does take a different set of dispositions that people are on they're on a spectrum. Some of them are ready right now, and some of them will be ready in the future. Some of them are not ready yet. And so that presents some challenges in terms of the fidelity to the philosophy that is an unknown.
From a logistics standpoint, though, the recommendation as it reads, would it include something like that, right? It says that as it reads right now, we're deferring 9-12 to the following school. Or wait, we're going to flip to that. Possibly, right? It's not guaranteeing that we're deferring it to the following school year. We're possibly going to defer it.
For consideration, yes.
For consideration. Okay. I just want to make sure that we're
Yes.
clear on what the recommendation is. Okay. All right, clear, sir.
I guess my biggest concern is, and I've been listening to both sides. I mean, this is a year of a referendum. We've had the incident on the track, which is huge. If another incidents like that happens, there could be litigation. That's even bigger. When we look at the budget, I came up here because I have 3 boys, but I don't just represent my 3 boys. I represent the community as a whole, and that's what the budget is. It's as a whole. We have to look at that. I don't like to look at unknowns or hopes or, you know, how the market's going to be. I think the biggest thing is that if we do this, I look at, is it going to fail? Is it going to work? Are we willing to invest this money? But then what happens if it doesn't go forward? I am open for, if we did a classroom and do a test pilot and say, hey, this is not going to cost us money if it goes well, but I want inclusion though. I would like, I know there's other students in the high school and the other elementary schools, the middle schools that are looking to break out and excel. And I would be open to do that. But with the referendum, if that doesn't go through, if the TIF doesn't go through, we have no revenue. We have nothing. Where are we going to go as far as like to replace a track and all sorts of stuff? And that is my biggest concern.
I think those are valid points.
I mean, I'm open to testing this to see where it goes. And then we can examine it after a year and go, okay, the kids worked out, it worked great. There's more kids that were excited about it. Go for there rather than just throw money at it. You know?
No, I think you have valid points there. And ones that I think are valid.
Guys, give me a second. Let me get Kleisner back on the line real quick before. Sorry, man.
Thank you.
You back?
Yeah, I'm back. Thank you.
Mr. Gonzalez, if I could make one quick clarification too. I know Mr. Kleisner mentioned a couple different times that it was $500,000 for 2 years. That's not what we projected. We projected 261 for first year. And then for the second year, we wouldn't need it at this point in time, based on what we do know, we wouldn't anticipate needing additional staff, maybe some additional dollars for software licenses, that kind of thing, but that would be negligible. So it wouldn't be $500,000 for 2 years. It would just be that 261 for year one, and then again for year two. So I don't want it to be looked at as it's 261, yes, but not 261 and then $500,000. And I just wanted to clarify that as we were talking, because I don't know if that was clear.
I took it as $500,000 for those 2 years.
Yeah.
Like I think he intended.
Yeah. I just wanted to clarify that because people were thinking, is it 7 or is it
261 for 9th and an additional 240 for the 10th, so 501 total for the first 2 years.
Yes.
Together.
So, sorry, because it's on point with this. So if we didn't do 9th grade, so like if we don't do 9th grade this year, but next year we do 9th and 10th grade, what's that number then?
That would be probably the 261 again.
Okay, so we are saying for 9th and 10th grade, because again, those teachers are for those two grades, it'd be 261. Okay, thank you. Sorry.
But I was just gonna say, from a grander standpoint, I've been, grappling with this question for the last 2 months, like you guys have, and like I've facilitated back and forth over those two. But I think an important point, like Ryan made, is that it is a pilot program, and that Adam made the point earlier that socially kids don't want to leave their cohorts into 7th and 8th grade. And that's why I think the 35 6th graders is the most important point in all this, because that means that 35 kids who don't already have a core group of friends in middle school took the leap to get there. And I think a lot of what we're saying is like throwing money and everything. I think if you build it, like they will come. And if you build these institutions, and we already have a base, we're doing curricular innovation, we have parents, staff, and kids. I've not heard a single negative thing about Kipla throughout this entire process, except from a physical standpoint. I think that says a lot, and I think we have these impassioned students. And if we don't want to, well, never mind. I do want to adhere to the guidelines of making everybody college, career, and community ready, and I think this does a phenomenal job of this, and I think we're in a unique position to move forward as a district positively. And as leaders, I think I'm going to have to say that we have to move forward. I don't know that I can say that right now. I obviously haven't voted, but I think there's too many yeses to take a chance. And I think we have this opportunity, and I think we need to take it.
Do we have data yet on student performance on standardized assessments from Kipla?
I would have to assume yes. I'll let Patrick speak to that.
We have 2 iterations of iReady. So those students were tested in February. We had, in the fall, and then again in the wintertime. We have not.
The iReady
completed
benchmark, the iReady benchmarking, correct?
Yep. So we do have that. They do not have the IAR state assessment. We won't get that back usually till sometimes we're lucky enough to get in the summertime. It's usually September, October-ish. So we do have iReady is normed both against the state and the national level. And then we'll do a final iteration of that in a month or so, and then we'll get IAR data the following.
And the performance on the benchmarking has been?
It is, looking at it from a 3rd through 8th standpoint, our growth has been pretty significant on those assessments. I would say the proficiency scores are plus or minus 2 percentage points of where our elementaries and middle schools are performing.
to piggyback on Edmund's point, I think one way to look at this is also look at this as like as a lab school, right? And lab schools are by definition these experimental, risks that you take, which then eventually you use that lab school to model new practices at your normal schools, right? And the normal schools start to turn into the lab schools, right? But you can't do that until, it's kind of your point, if you build it, they will come. You can't do that until you get a few years of it going. And to pull the rug out from underneath them right now, I worry about that too, right? So if you say there's no ninth grade, we've heard from folks who say, well, I sent my kid there for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade thinking there was going to be a ninth, right? So are we pulling the rug out from underneath?
Has there been any parents talked about now that if ninth grade is gone, that they're going to pull their kids from 3rd to 8th grade?
Yeah.
I got a whole room.
Yeah.
The people that can't see, there's a whole room side saying yes. Is there, I don't know if there's been surveys done or
No,
anything.
We haven't
to
done a
mention.
survey, but we've not heard any.
So to Dr. Lawler's point too, of if we take away this, then we are going to lose our 3rd through 8th graders. They're not going to, well, obviously we're going to lose our 8th graders because they're going to go to high school, but our 3rd through 7th graders, and then who's going to necessarily join 3rd grade, and we're going to, you know, the influx of those kids. Are there other schools that only do 3rd through 8th grade, or is there, sorry, I know it's not your 3rd through 8th grade and high school's different? What's their success rate? Things like that. I mean, I guess if we go this one direction, we've got to give our parents something to say, yes, still keep coming for 3rd through 8th grade.
It shows a lack of faith in the program, and if we
Right.
lose all those 3rd to 8th graders, we lose all the money we put in the first place, and that's another fiscal thing that we have to think about.
Yeah.
And then it shows that if the board doesn't want to fund a program like this with improved test scores, then what do we want to fund? It sends a message.
So for me, Aaron, I don't have a problem with your suggestions either, right? And I think Ryan brought up good points, and Adam, I think you brought up good points too. My concern is that we've hinged this decision on this one recommendation. It's now we're kind of here, so if you vote yes to this recommendation, you are saying we're going to kick this a year. And that really does limit what we're going to do. Like, can we have alternative ideas or other? We're kind of saying no, right? So that is the trouble with this recommendation. I'm not putting that on you, Dr. Atkins. You're just the guy in the front right now. We're pointing at, right?
I appreciate
I think anybody could have had some kind of recommendation up here from something else, somebody else, right? So, but I think that's where we're struggling now, is that this is a very limited recommendation that we could vote on.
So with the board, and I'm just asking just from where I stand is, and we're not pulling the rug on, from the underneath this program. Like you said, there's a majority interest, but if we tested it, you do an experiment, you test it. And I feel just testing it is the best next step. And then you come back in a year and we can go, okay, look what happened. We look at the scores, we see the true data, what it cost, and go from there. And I think that would be a wise step. Not pulling it away, shutting it down. Like you said, we already moved forward. Let's test it.
And by
Still testing, it's still experimenting.
And by testing, you mean like in the Kaneland High School?
Yeah,
what
like
Brenda
try it or
was saying
just
earlier?
it would have to be in a controlled. It has to be in a controlled.
The problem is, I would love to do that. That would have probably been like a year ago discussion, like planning of that. How do you, there's no time to build something like that. That is, so I get the testing part of it, but it's not going to be anywhere close to the experience that they would have at Kipla. I mean, just the dynamic and the way they're taught and how the groups are, and the students work with each other, and they're up and down in grades, and they're supporting each other, the teachers and everything. There's absolutely no way you can implement a test run to really, and then to base that data is based off of a test run that is nothing close to what they would have had at Kipla. So it'd be false data. It wouldn't be.
Well, that's what I'd like to know is then if you have the students, this is what I'm trying to understand is, do the students want to be in a separate building with just their classmates? Are they okay with being at the high school? And that's where I'm kind of, I want to understand, is it the learning environment that we're spending the money on? Or can they be anywhere and still get the same education? Because ninth grade are going to have different teachers. They're not going to have the 6th, 7th, 8th grade teachers. It's going to be a whole new format. And I know you can't truly get true scores from one year from 17 students. You're going to have to see a progress. It's going to take a couple years. But if they're there with the same teachers they're going to have, or if they're at the high school, I mean, I'm just trying to, what environment? Is it the environment that they absolutely have to have that they're going to benefit from? Is it the teachers? Is it the curriculum? What is going to benefit the most? And that's where I look at it and say, we get a room, get the teachers that we're going to have, test it, see what's going to work. And then we come back, look at it and say, okay, it's expanding. It's not going to work here. The referendum didn't go. We don't have the extra rooms. And you got Kipla, you got it open. So
Well, the thing that it's all of that. It's a model. That model cannot just be picked up and moved temporarily into a high school and transfer classroom space where that model can be built in there. They're just not built to do that. That's not something that, so to test that out, it would, yeah, it's just, I mean, we're investing, testing is not the right word. We're investing in Kipla, and that's the model is what's important. All these kids left their schools. Absolutely all these kids left their schools, left their friends, and took a leap and went to some place that they didn't know. And so these 8th graders, they knew they were only going to be there 1 year. They knew that it was 3rd through 5th, 7th through 8th, 6th, sorry, 3rd through 5th, 6th through 8th, right? So our 8th graders knew, parents knew, they were going to have new 9th and 10th or 9th grade teachers because they knew that model for high school was going to be different compared to what they've had, for 8th grade. And so it's a model. It's hard to, I wish.
It's a different educational approach.
Yeah.
Than what you find having taught in schools all over the place. It is stronger into the PBLs, the problem-based learning, project-based learning, assimilative learning, I guess would be the best term for it, which is hard to duplicate in your traditional high school, middle school structures. It's just the reality of it, for right or for wrong, for better or worse.
So then you're leaning environment. So you need a different environment. You need a separate.
You need the freedom and the ability. You need the freedom and the ability to take a chance on a different learning approach. That is not always there having, correct me if I'm wrong, you were over at Plainfield. Being in an environment where you can take some chances, some measured chances to enhance student learning and ultimately, student excellence. And
So I have a logistics question, because I don't know now. All right, okay, so tonight's the minimum staffing plan. We have to have a minimum staffing plan in place tonight for any of these things we've talked about. If we made a new model at the high school, or if we kept Kipla open, like any of these possibilities, this very gray, non-black and white area, what do we now have to do for minimum staffing? Because isn't tonight the night?
I think that Mrs. Simmons hit on something a few minutes ago, and just in terms of the timing and the pacing of the year. Were the board to direct something different than the recommendation presented, the administration will follow through with it. I think that there will need to be along the way the ebb and flow of what is feasible and doable versus what is dreamt of as a preferred future, right? And so we get back to, I think Mr. Mankivsky mentioned about the challenges of staffing this. please know that the minimum staffing plan accounts for all of our current staff. In addition to that, as I mentioned earlier, we've committed to our association to not force staff to teach at KIPLA. And you wouldn't want to anyway, just because of the dispositions that go with it and the personal preparedness to go into a program like that, which means new hires. Humanities, probably reasonable that we could find a personalized learning centric candidate. Math science, I just attended the NIU job fair. Historically, we've had 300-400 current student teachers looking for jobs. This year we had like 110, and I think there were two science people in the whole NIU Convocation Center, and I think they were a hot commodity. We'll put it that way. So my concern at filling the positions with the kind of educators that would be most successful in a personalized learning environment, I have some very significant worries about that. That makes me a little nervous. The logistics of it, of an additional hybrid model, I think that there would need to be that understanding of what the parameters are that the board is willing to and interested in going out to, and by that could be the financial and the time frame and the commitment and those kinds of things. Because as we talked about 3 meetings ago, when the board requested that we bring this additional insight as to how this decision evolved, we talked about the fact that it's not, I think Mrs. Simmons, I think you mentioned too, it's not just necessarily 9th grade, but if it is 9th grade, then it's also 10th, 11th, and 12th too. And just like any multi-year projection, the further out you go, the less clear it is. Even with the best planning, the less clear it is. And so what junior and senior year might look like for one of our students who are currently an 8th grader, I can give you an educated guess having done this for 27 years, but I don't know that it would be a guess I'd ask you to, to go to Vegas on, if you will, because there's just so many variables. So the administration would need some clarity from the board as to what those parameters are, because I think the other kind of addressed concern is how expansive does that become, right? We can talk about it as a minimum, but I think the board has to be very aware of the potential of the maximum as well, right? And what I would not want the board to do, and you've mentioned it in different aspects throughout the conversation, the element of the unknown is in and of itself a barrier for all of the things that we're doing, right? It's a barrier for, we've had conversations about a long-term staffing plan to address some of those additional needs that we've talked about. We've had to scale that back significantly because of some of the other things that we've had to do. And those are always ongoing push-pulls that any district has to look at. And I don't know that without some clarity from the board of, I don't know what the right word is, risk tolerance, maybe is a good word, phrase, what could that look like? Because we had a model for what it would look like. As we evaluated along the way, it became untenable in our mind to progress forward with it. So we shared with the community that we're not going to go forward with it so that they could register for high school. The boards asked for additional information about how that evolved. So we're sharing that tonight. If there is yet a plan C or B involved, we have great people working here in this district, teachers and administrators alike, support staff, everybody. We'd be able to bring something to you. I have no idea what that something would look like without a couple of very lengthy work sessions with all of the people that we've had those work sessions with since October. You know what I mean? So we'd have to revisit all of that again, which then brings back into play that initial question of the timing. I don't have a good method right now, not knowing what all the possibilities could be, to tell you what the time frame would look like. If I had a narrower scope of what those possibilities could be, I could give you a narrower prediction of the timing and could we be ready for, but I don't at this point in time. And it's difficult with this because we have so many preferred futures for so many of our students. I don't know that we can effectively capitalize on all of those preferred futures. Do you know what I mean? And we do have legitimate and real barriers to being able to do everything for everybody all the time. We try our hardest, you know, and so I would just want the board to know that that's not lost on us. You know, we recognize that there's 12 little faces connected to this decision and this recommendation. I've subbed over at Kipla. I've seen them. They've walked around in their classes. I've watched them learn. But when we take all of the pieces in, so if some of this is going to rest on the decision, I would imagine.
Are there still more slides to get through?
I
appreciate the conversation. We can continue the conversation. I just didn't know if there were more.
Yep.
Okay.
So as the recommendation sits now, it's because of the way it's written. Just iron this out real quick.
Yes.
So the motion would be that the Board of Education approve the deferral of the Kipla K through 9 expansion in 2024 and 2025. That the administration directed to monitor and assess the future viability. Basically, an aye for this would be no 9th grade K through 8 for the next school year. A nay would be, here's the money, go get us started on 9th grade for Kipla, right?
Yes.
That's
Oh, I don't know, is that right?
I don't,
Well, yeah, well,
if you say nay, couldn't there be another, maybe not tonight, but another day? I hate to do this, but I hate it. Remember when you said like pick the A, pick the B, pick the C option, right? Like, couldn't the next meeting have that? So maybe we do a pilot inside the high school. Maybe we have a full 9th grade investment. Maybe it's a 9th, 10th grade investment. Like, I don't know. Sorry, I just.
No, this is what we need to. That's why I wanted to bring this up, because we need to clarify what a nay says.
I agree with you.
so that's kind of my thing too, is a nay for me would have been, there's a couple more options that have been talked about. Like you brought up the model, but the model, we can't decide that model because we're not the teachers, you know, and so we don't have the history of everything. Can we do 9 and 10? Do we have the numbers for that? And so then it's 261, not 500,000. It's, you know, so is there, I even see just A and a B, you know, option, but I don't even know if a model at the high school, what that looks like. So that is.
Admittedly, I've never been a fan of the A, B's, and C's, but I do think that they solve a problem, which is they allow you to have a richer recommendation, right? That you can choose from.
Another clarification. So say it gets Nate down. Could this exact recommendation be approved in the next meeting then, or not? Like, what if we come back and then we say we do approve the deferral? Is that, or once we vote it down, it's not coming back?
I don't know how that would work.
But I'm trying to understand the question.
So say we vote this recommendation down today. Could this recommendation be one of the ABCs on the next one? Or are we saying with a nay that there will be Kipla 9th grade?
Well, that's what the intention was, but if this is voted down and then the board directs us to bring something else back, then that would be another direction that the board, or another directive that the board would ask us to bring something back.
Can one of those? I think what Edmund's. Let me see if I think what he's asking those. Can one of those options still be no 9th grade for Kipla? Like, are we basically eliminating by not approving this? Are we eliminating the removal of Kipla 9th grade for the next school year
in this form?
Yeah, because we voted on this here.
I'm just thinking clarity for parents tonight.
Yeah. It's a valid question.
That's a good question, because I know I think if a motion is not forwarded or is no to bring the same one back, I think it can be done, but I think it then needs to be approved at a higher level. I think there's a different percent that second time. So I would.
You have to have a person who voted in the prevailing move to reconsider then. And you could be eligible for another vote at the subsequent meeting. That would be parliamentary procedure wise.
Interesting.
And that's
what they have to be.
Almost for years information.
Yeah. But typically it doesn't come back in its same form.
But it's interesting because maybe it should come back as option C because maybe option B and A are not feasible. Because I don't know if they're feasible. I think we can make them feasible. I don't know. Right?
Can we not just reconstruct the motion right now and say, someone say, I'd like to make a motion that to direct administration, or I'd like to make a motion that we direct administration to come back with 3 different options based on this. I feel like I've seen that.
The board can,
done before.
if there's a recommendation for action on here, this action is not the action that the board has to take. It can be amended or it can be changed.
Right, we can amend it.
Yes.
And then we don't have to have
Because
this.
it's on the agenda for action, yes.
So do we want to work on formulating something to further the conversation?
Do we want to further the conversation?
Or do we want to just decide here now?
That's
Yeah,
what I'm
that's another question.
See what Ryan wants.
What do you think,
Well-
Ryan? Any opinion?
Yeah, I mean, I think if we can come back and reformulate something, because like I said, I'm not against some innovation and learning and everything, but from the fiscal aspect of it, if we can come back and formulate something that does make sense from a fiscal responsibility standpoint, and also make sure that the students either have a better transition into the 9th grade, or we can accommodate it better without as many resources having to be poured into it right now, based on the state of the economy, based on the number of students that are actually interested right now. I think that would be, the best of both worlds from my standpoint.
Okay, so can we get a straw poll then for who would be willing to proceed forward with an amended recommendation at this point? Let's at least start there. Got a digital, Ryan, thumbs up or down?
Virtual thumbs up.
Virtual, yeah, virtual. Okay, so then let's formulate an amended recommendation then at this point, or an amended motion.
Sure. Does it have to include the ABC, what we're talking about, or are we just saying to put it out to, well, no, I guess I'm asking more Dr. Layden and Adam.
As much clarification as possible, because as Dr. Atkins said, the time frame is closer and closer for families to be able to make decisions based on what action that the board does take. So
That's
as
why I'm
much
saying we might want to take decisions right now, because I think there's a lot of time consideration for 2 weeks.
Well, that's one of my concerns with
We
this
don't need
initially,
the 2 weeks.
is that they're
do we need
they're
it?
throwing something together.
Do we need the 2 weeks?
I don't even know. I don't know how people are feeling. I don't know what the vote is, right?
What more information?
I would like to know,
We got hamstrung here.
Can you repeat that?
Nothing. Go on.
Were you talking to us?
It's all right.
Oh, go ahead.
yeah, no, I guess my struggle is I would love to know if Mr. McCauley's idea of a model, the high school model, is that potential, or is the 9th, 10th grade a potential, or do we need to say no this year and spend this next year them focusing on that? And I guess I just don't know how long that's going to take them. We're not the experts here, so it's like I don't know how long it takes you guys to figure out if we were to talk about a high school model, or if we talk about a 9th and 10th grade, go that option.
Mr. Rowley,
Or
can
is
you
this
share
better?
a little bit about that?
Yep, so we've looked at those models. Probably the biggest change, if you look at a high school only model, a model that is housed currently at the high school, we would still be looking at the staff to hire, to find and hire. We would save, for lack of a better term, on curricular license, because we already own those for the high school. And I believe in that 261 that was budgeted at about 10,000. And then you would save on the $1,000 for transportation. You would still need costs if space is available.
Okay.
And that piece I would need to work with our high school administrative team and our buildings and grounds and operations, just to look at what a viable space would look like. Please don't quote me. I'm guessing there's probably square footage for kids to be housed. Is that a viable learning space with technology and screens and all of those pieces? So that's where some of those, we would need time to figure that out. I just physically in the high school where those students would go, we would need time to look into that. The other piece that is very easily doable, and there is a caveat in our course book. It would likely be new courses for those students or possible new courses. So we may need, if we're looking at a personalized English class versus an English 9 class, easily to do, but that might be an added piece to look at on what that would look like if all of those students are housed together in one setting for the entire day. Those
So
are
no-
some of the
yeah.
unknowns.
Now that model is completely different, right, Mr. McCauley? What you were saying, you were talking about just more in the morning, they have their homeroom or they have their,
Yeah, I mean, like,
this is having Kipla, mini Kipla at the high school is what you're,
Okay, yep, so
you're
then
proposing.
that
So that's
wouldn't be,
something
but
completely different.
all
that's
things
what
to
I
flush
was-
That's
that
what
what
I
you're-
thought he was saying.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I.
that's
I took it
exactly
as
what
that it
said.
was only
Yeah,
certain.
That's possible, but you said you gotta look at it.
I would want to have a more fleshed out plan. When we looked at that plan originally, the space was a huge impact to find a space for that without disrupting either current programs or without completely outfitting an unused space right now to outfit that to be a learning space. We also looked at the experience that students have, and it would be different at the high school versus at the academy when we looked at housing it here. The most viable space would be a current wing. Students would still be involved in a busy student life, and that's a little bit different than when they're housed over at Meredith. The other logistical pieces to the curricular side, it wouldn't be that impactful if at all to have it physically located. It would just be conditioning to not listen to the bells and change class periods and things like that. That would curricularly be the biggest difference between Meredith and our high school.
And then the cost for that too, you said that, what, is it still around the 261?
I would ballpark it at about 250, not knowing what those space needs. I would anticipate still having 3 staff that we would need and X amount of dollars. I don't know what that would look like to make a learning space, a viable learning space. We would save on curricular license because those are by site, physical site, and we would save on transportation.
But could
And
you
that
say
was-
possibly on staff? Here's a very hypothetical.
Yep.
You're welcome. Are there staff that don't want to go to Kipla because they have to go to Kipla? And are there staff that maybe would be willing to try this thing if they didn't have to leave the high school? I was a teacher. I remember.
Yeah.
Like, I want to hang out with my buddy at, lunchtime and stuff. And if I'm in a different building, I don't do it anymore, right? So I wonder, how many of them would say, well, I might give it a shot if it's in the building.
That could be a question that we could ask with staff. I would think that would invoke a whole variety of conversations that we would need to have with the staff and
Sure.
even potentially with the association
Yeah.
about that. But I would also caution the board that this is where we now get into what exactly does A, B, and C look like, and I'd be remiss if I went too far down that road with the board right here in the moment, because that's something that, please know, this current recommendation or the current structure that we're making this recommendation based on took quite a significant amount of time and discussion to flush out some of those details. I would be remiss if I didn't warn all of us collectively about postulating too much of that now, because I wouldn't want any one person to latch onto something that would help them sway a decision or assume something or whatever when we haven't flushed it out in detail, because that would need to be done on a much more specific level to then bring back to you.
Sure.
So I don't know that the the big picture wonderings, sure, but the specific details of a brainstormed idea here right now, I would have to slow that down a little bit and just say we'd have to maybe take some of that, work on that profusely with our team, and then bring that back to the board.
Okay. I was just looking at this. Cut a couple dollars. You cut a couple dollars if folks are paying at the high school.
For sure.
It isn't a $250,000 tag anymore. We just maybe cut, significant chunk of it off, right?
And there would be impact, like as you mentioned, potentially that there are then current existing staff who go, yeah, I could be in for that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But we don't know, and so I
don't.
wouldn't want to postulate that
No, I
too
agree.
far down the road here. But good question.
To that point, I would point out the Health Occupations Academy at District 129, West Aurora, as a kind of a cohort within a cohort.
Yep.
If you enroll in it, you foreclose a whole bunch of opportunities. However, you do have the benefit of that. I would, so specifically, get in touch with your cohorts over at 129, because they've been doing this for, geez, over 20 years from when I was there, you know. So it is indeed possible, but spitballing tonight, I think all we have in front of us is this. If it gets voted down, maybe it's time to take a look at some of those. My humble opinion.
So then, if we vote on the current recommendation, a nay wouldn't necessarily be, a nay wouldn't necessarily be enacting, here's the money, go do KIPLA as you planned. It would be more, okay, now we're gonna bring these other options to the table, essentially.
Could very well be. Could very well
With
be.
direction from the board, yes.
Yeah, so we'd have to give them direction on what we want back.
Yeah.
So then, to keep the ball rolling on this, we're presented with this option. This is KIPLA as planned with 9th grade. Second option, which I'm calling in my head the hybrid option, where you have KIPLA at the high school, where that's the second option, right? Are we basically just asking them to bring another option on top of the option they presented, or is there other opinions?
So the three options are
One,
just
no.
No KIPLA next year. Yes, KIPLA next
Yes,
year.
KIPLA as presented here.
Or a blend where it's maybe in the high school and it's like in some maybe that's like a B sub 1, sub 2, because there could be a couple different variations of that one, right? Like the hybrid could have a few different models.
So basically, the work would be having to put that hybrid blended together and then present this again.
My only thing would be to not necessarily maybe do that, but the 9th and 10th grade.
Yeah.
Not just
Okay,
9th
so
to,
the fourth one.
because I think they've already showed us kind of what 9th grade would look like, how many kids we're going to have. I think let's expand it to 9th and 10th. What would those numbers look like? How fast or how well you guys have talked to other parents and like what that possible potential number look like, the cost behind that. So let's not 500,000, 260, so we have that straight because we've had a lot of conversations tonight.
Dr. Fuchs, Dr. Atkins, or Mr. Alley, are there other questions that you might have, other feedback that you need before action?
Yeah, so the presentation that we shared with you tonight is a deferral of the decision for the 24-25 school year, with the understanding that there would be conversation and monitoring for the 25-26 school year. So my question for the board would be, in those options, would you want those options presented prior to the 24-25 school year for the 24-25 school year, or in line with the recommendation that we have in front of you for a year and 4 months from now for the 25-26 school year? I know that that would mean something for the current 8th grade students, but I also know that that would mean something for the investigation of all the different potential options and flushing them out to then bring back a more robust set of options. Not that we couldn't do that in a shortened time frame. I just would need to know what the time frame is that the board is desiring.
I would hope so. Yeah.
I would prefer sooner than later. But just to make it even horrible, you could have each one of them for this next year or the following year. Then we just doubled the 8 options, Chris.
Well, and I wonder if,
I mean, whatever you want, we'll do.
well, doing the 24-25, doing this year, will give us kind of a small snapshot of what next year is. So when we go through this and you present it for this next year, and if we say no, then we're looking at those maybe options for the following year. And that might be that direction of, that's kind of their guide for them for next year. Not, because I don't want to put more work on you to say, oh yeah, predict
It's not about
your
that.
crystal
We just
ball
need to know
out
what the timing is. That's all.
Yeah.
Is that we spoke? Is that everybody speaking? Yes.
So then I'm trying to figure out how to formulate this recommendation. Because at this point, we're entertaining a motion at the Board of Education to approve the deferral, which an I for this would mean no Kipla.
Right, correct.
No ninth.
A nay would be, or 4, yeah. A nay would be keeping our options open, essentially.
Yes.
Or can we,
Okay.
or can we rewrite the
Yeah,
recommendation?
because I feel like we need to rewrite it, because how does that leave room for us to?
Yes, you don't
amend?
have, but I'm just following what Edmund said about this recommendation. You can change your recommendation as part of this conversation for sure. I just know that, I don't know if you shared, Edmund, that you want to hear this one first, but if the group is in favor of it.
I was just asking for clarity's sake.
Okay.
And I think, I don't
Okay.
know, and I might be wrong on this too, but if we change the recommendation here, that then gives you guys directive, gives you better clarity of what we're asking versus us saying nay, and then we're like, okay.
Depending on
here's
what the recommendation is, yes.
Yeah,
Or
so-
depending on what the direction is for administration to go back and
Yeah.
research.
So let me rephrase this, and you guys tell me if this is correct or not. So I'm gonna say I will at this point I will entertain a motion to amend the recommendation to include 3 options. A being deferment of 9th grade for the 2024-2025 school year.
Mhm.
B, I don't know what other word to use other than hybrid model we've just discussed. Presenting us with the hybrid model for how this program would be implemented into the high school, the high school's physical location. Or C, basically giving us what you just gave us, but providing in 9th grade and 10th grade
Mhm.
Well,
to be housed at Kipling.
that'd have to be D.
Because you could have just ninth.
Okay,
or you could-
so then 9th grade, and then
Yes.
D is 9th and 10th grade?
Because if it's 9th, then you're evaluating next year to
Both,
reconsider.
both housed at
Yeah.
Kipling, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna try this, and let's hope I don't screw it up.
I have a question before you finish it.
Yes.
Typically, when we bring options to the board, you would ask for an administrative recommendation, which is what you see at the bottom of almost every board memo. Do you want these options with our recommendation or without our recommendation?
My assumption would be that your recommendation would be the same.
I'd like to see the recommendations. I'd like to see which of those options are both feasible, given the relatively short time frame we have to work with, and all the other factors. I would like to have that comment, that opinion. I'd like to see it.
Another logistics question. This question is going to come up next meeting, correct? Not like in another month or
No.
Okay. Next meeting.
Is that
That's part of the question that I had just asked
Yeah.
from the board to include in the guidance or the statement. It doesn't have to necessarily be part of the recommendation, but just to let the superintendent know when you would want this brought back. It just means different things for us in terms of the allocation.
Next meeting.
well?
Not a
So
problem.
if their current recommendation is to defer it, so then what are we gonna ask them for? A priority, like to prioritize, or are we gonna ask them for their recommendation based on all those, and then remove deferring it from the options?
Well, you just stated a second ago, deferring was one of them.
Right, but if you're recommending that now,
Huh.
what if you come back and recommend it again? Like, what's the point of having them recommend if they're just gonna say, well, we recommended this? I mean, the administration.
Dr. Atkins, would another month of uncertainty like make this way harder, like a lot more challenging to staff or is that-
The staffing component, the scheduling component, I don't want to minimize the amount of time, effort, and energy needed for that, but that is lesser of a consideration to me than the nebulous area that 12 families will be in during that time. You know, and again, I mentioned that I see 12 faces on my little runner, you know, like Fox News or CNN has that little ticker. I have one too, and it's got kids' faces on it. So I recognize the impact to them, and that's what I'd be concerned about in there. So if there is a reality that the board's going to direct us to do something different than the current recommendation for 24-25, the next thing I would suggest in that is to do that as quickly as humanly possible, for the sake of those families so that they're not in limbo any longer than they already are.
So
So,
those
you know,
ninth
it-
graders, sorry, go ahead.
No, for us, it just means prioritizing our time differently. We have the normal scope of things that we do during this year. It's a very busy time for your administration with staffing, because now that the minimum staffing plan's done, we do placements, and then we move to the support staff side of it. We do all those things, and there's a lot of work that goes on between now and the end of April. If we put this in there, that just means different things for us. But I want to reassure you that that is our job. That's not a barrier at all. The barrier to me is the limbo to the families. So that would lead us to then expediting this as much as humanly possible. And I'm sure our team will sit down and we'll
So
get
for-
recommendations back to you
for
if that's what the
those
board wants.
12 students and those families, do we want to eliminate the no option for next year?
Eliminate the deferral.
Eliminate the deferral.
Let them make that decision.
Just keep
I
it.
don't know. Those ninth, the kids, those 12 students, they are already registered for high school, right? So if we end up deferring it, they're already set to go. They already kind of, I mean, they don't know what their schedule looks like. Yeah, so, but it would be a big deal. Like if, we end up saying, yes, you're going to continue to go to Kipla or a model at the high school, then that would change their schedules. But I think that would probably be a more positive experience for them versus if we said, no, they're just, it is today, it will be the same as, if we make that decision.
Can we direct you guys to, I guess we could, can we direct you guys, we already know what your recommendation is, your call it macro recommendation, what your overall recommendation is. Can we direct you guys then to come back with, we're gonna still keep the deferral on the table, but come back with your recommendation as to what would be, in the words of Mr. Mankivsky, the most feasible, the most, I forget the verbiage he used, but the most appropriate recommendation, financially, logistically.
So I believe it would be the recommendation that we brought you tonight, not the recommendation, but the model or structure,
Okay.
right?
Just not defer it. Right?
Our recommendation tonight was to defer it.
Right.
But I am suggesting, based on what I know, is that the model that we brought you with the ninth grade over at Kipla, with the student schedule and teacher schedule, that is the plan that we would use or want to use if the board were to direct us tonight to move forward with Kipla. Because I believe that they've explored the in-high school model based on what you said, and there were issues with that as well. Yeah.
And those could be brought to you, but I think we could comfortably tell you now that those would be second, third.
That's what
Prioritized
So I don't
recommendations.
know that your ideas need to be fleshed out, because I believe that's already been done.
Right.
And so I think you have a choice, defer or move forward as presented. That would be what I would
So then
recommend.
do we go back and not redo the?
But I think the question is, while I would 100% agree with Dr. Fuchs and Dr. Atkins on that, is there something the board needs to hear in what Mr. McCauley said is a hybrid, or Adam called it a hybrid model? Because I agree, it's not, if that was something we recommended either over the current process that was built for 3 or 4 years, or the deferral, those would likely be the two recommendations that are most feasible for expansion. And I think when the question was asked about families, what are families, I think it was Mr. Mankivsky's question, what are families looking for and asking for? I think they were looking and asking for what the model would look like over at KMAC, because I don't think as they processed through this, there was even the thinking of some other model. So that's why those would likely be the two recommendations, or the two best options for us moving forward.
For me, I would like to just hear, even though you guys have already done, maybe some of the, you have done the work. Because if it comes down to something that we do defer this next time, and we know what to look for, our board is educated enough, then maybe some of this, whatever the potential might be for the next year. I just feel like there's certain knowledge that I would still like to hear from what you guys have done, some of the legwork that you guys have done, and what the model, Mr. McCauley suggested.
Okay, so what do we want to do then? Do we got to redo the straw poll, or you guys want to proceed with the 4-option motion we came up with? Proceed with the 4-option?
Yeah.
Okay, we're good with that? Okay. I'm going to, so Julie, I have to say it slow so you can write it, right?
You got it.
Okay.
Thank you.
I would make a motion to table this. The administration come back with the option. I'm gonna table this item, move to table this item until such time as we have a motion to table.
So what does that look like then? What is that?
Motion to table means
Basically, we don't
it
make a
could,
decision on this.
it could be
Right.
brought back, it could be brought back amended as to those other options.
But we would give them.
But then do we have to bring it back?
I know.
Wouldn't that delay things?
No, you would take it off the table and replace it with the amended being those options.
Oh, you're saying table the original motion instead of
Table
amending
the-
this. Oh,
Table the original
is
motion.
that the proper way to do it? To table the original and then, as opposed to
Roberts
amending
would-
the current?
Roberts or Sturgis would both have you table, and then your next meeting, you move it off the table based upon the recommendation and use a substitute.
Well, then do we have to wait till next meeting then?
Unless you're ready to, I can call the question too. I mean, I have a motion to table right now, which is in order.
But as far as your question, Adam, something needs to be done tonight.
Yeah, well,
Yes,
so if we
for
table
sure.
it, we're just putting it off till next meeting.
Correct, which
Right.
is what I think that you're having us do regardless, correct?
Yeah, but we're not giving you direction then. It's just tabling this, right?
We
Correct, tabling would bring back the same thing without direction.
Oh,
Okay.
So we would need some sort of a direction.
So to me, that's delaying it.
Yes,
I
to
don't know,
answer
maybe
your
I'm
question. It seems like it, yes.
Okay, well, so you made the motion, Bob. Someone has to second it. And then we have to vote. Any seconds for that table?
Wait, I'm sorry. Elementary stuff is not my, I don't know what we just did. Okay, so we're tabling this, but
a motion to table.
the motion to
A
table,
motion
but then next meeting, we amend it then, or are we not amending? it?
Next meeting, we have to take it off the table and we have to,
With an amended version.
yeah, with an amended version. So basically,
Oh, there could be an amended version that's on the table. It's on this thing, and it's amended.
Or can we do that, skip that part and do that now?
yeah,
I guess, I don't know timing wise.
Well, so you already made the motion. Does anyone want to second that, the motion to table? You have to have a
Sure,
second.
I'll second it, because I don't know what we're doing.
No.
Well, wait, no, because we just voted down if we don't want to do
No,
that,
'cause-
right?
Yeah, that would be the approach.
I think that's what you have to do now, don't we?
Yeah.
Well, you
Call the
cannot
question.
second it, but
I
if
think
you
we
want to
should
second
vote.
it.
Why don't we vote on what's here, go with the nays and the ayes.
On the table?
Yes.
Okay, so
Say
we have a
vote
motion.
here. If there's a majority, let them.
We have a motion.
Wait,
You're
what do we
comfortable with your second?
No, I don't, I just seconded.
Okay.
Am I seconding the table, or am I seconding
You're
this?
seconding the table. Bob made a motion to table it, which means we're gonna put it on the table till next meeting, and then we take it off the table at next meeting and give them direction. So
With the amendment.
But you don't have.
With
to
the
do-
amendment.
but No, so we have to wait then for your
that's,
direction.
that's,
Yeah, that's why.
that's why I'm not gonna,
So waiting for direction's bad.
well, given the,
Time.
Okay,
Time.
I'll withdraw the motion, and then
Oh, there you go.
I move to call the question.
so then that means we have to
Vote on the
vote
recommendation.
on it right now. Okay. Well, then, vote on the current recommendation. We can't amend it?
We don't have an amendment in front of us.
With a call of the question, we need 5 people at the current meeting when the question is called to be able to say, we're ready to call the question.
If we don't call the question, then can someone come up with a motion like we have been formulating? Can someone then say, I motion to amend the recommendation and then come up with what we were originally doing?
Yes.
Okay. So then, Mr. Mankivsky's calling the question. At that point, then we vote on it?
Just say 5 people that are going to support the calling of the question.
Anyone gonna
Which is a very nuanced semantic of,
I don't know what this means either.
5 people just support the calling of the question.
Yes.
Not a yay or nay.
That means we
Correct.
vote on this tonight, right here.
yes.
Yay or nay, for what's been
If
presented.
there's 5 people that support the calling of the question, yes.
So do we have any support? Going once?
But
Mr.
wait, let me clarify again. If it does get called into question, then it's a 4-3 vote.
No, it's a vote. we call the question.
It's bringing the
We
vote
take, we
right
take
now.
a vote
And
based
it
on.
doesn't need to be a 5 majority.
No.
No,
Oh,
it's still the
Just a
regular
call.
roll
I'll
call
support,
vote.
I'll support the call.
Okay, we got one. Kleisner, Mr. Kleisner? Okay, so that's just two.
So can
So
I
the-
make a motion then to
Yeah, if you want.
amend
do you
this
wanna make-
recommendation?
Do you want to make the
Do
motion?
we- How am I supposed to, okay,
So you're going back to amending it with the 4 parts?
yes.
If you want to say.
Do you want me to just list the 4 options or what's best for you?
So you want to make a motion
Should, that the
to
Board of Education
amend the recommendation
amend the recommendation
and direct administration
and direct administration
to provide
to provide,
defer.
just make sure, oh, you're good, okay. These 4 options: deferred, ninth grade at Kipla, the hybrid model at the high school, housing the Kipla. Thank you. Oh, I already did that. Sorry. Are we on number 3? Right?
C.
Yeah. Because I did deferred. I did the ninth grade Kipla. Then I did the hybrid. Correct. I thought that was and then the 9th and 10th grade Kipla. Sorry. Can you read that back? Make sure I got all 4.
We have deferred,
Yep.
9th at Kipla, a hybrid model at the high school, and
Yep.
9th and 10th at Kipla.
For the 2024-2025 school year.
24-25 school year.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you for the help.
Motion in a second.
Roll call, please.
Dr. Lawler,
Aye.
Mr. Mankivsky,
Aye.
Mr. Kleisner,
Aye.
Mrs. Simmons,
Aye.
Mr. Cook,
Aye.
Mr. McCauley, Mr. Gonzalez.
Aye. Motion passes as amended. I'm not going to repeat the whole thing. You guys got it. Okay. So now we move on to the 4th item of new business, which is was originally H9. The policy, and I'll put it over to Dr.
Yes.
Layton.
Yep, I will, with that, because it was pulled from consent for new business, I believe Board Member McCauley pulled that, so want to see what question you might have or what you'd like me to share for information-wise.
Yeah, so on the bottom, the language that the board has adopted. So I guess my question is, we chose the second one with the X. Is that correct?
Second one, the practice of banning books or other materials with the district's library media program is prohibited.
Correct.
The initial time when the board went through this, defaulted and didn't select either one of them. But as we went to submit this, as Mrs. Orfel went to submit this, press policy made us pick one of the two. And also we learned at the same time that without that second one or the first one, either one, that we also miss out on between $3,500 and $4,000 of grants for the schools to receive.
Okay. So do we have any freedom if we choose to not go with one of those two? And if we did, the penalty would be you'd lose the grant, correct?
Yes, and with press policy, we have to pick one or the other. And the reason why my recommendation for the second one is the law went into effect January 1st, but went into place House Bill 2789 over the summer, and that prohibits book banning in schools. So this is aligned with that. And then the other piece of what it still does is allows us to still use the same process to accept books that come into our library, into our collection. So all the second one that I'm recommending really does is just says that we can't ban books, which is aligned with state law anyway.
Can you define what banning means in terms of the intent when a board bans a book or
what the law is trying to get to the bottom of and support is based on partisan or doctrinal disapproval for the books. So if there's a book that we determine that hasn't been checked out in 20 years and we want to not necessarily ban it, but remove it, we can always still do that. What this is doing is saying, based on the partisan or doctrinal disapproval, that's the one through the law that we can't do. And this would still, again, still allow us to get our grants. It would follow the law and update our policy accordingly.
And basically, in order to be compliant with that. Right?
Yes, it's the law. We can't,
Yeah.
even if we didn't want to, but if we don't select one of these, then we would lose out on the up to $4,000 worth of grants per year. Did that answer the question?
Yep. Any other questions? Mr. Kleisner?
No questions. That cleared it up.
Okay. So at this time, I'll entertain a motion that the Board of Education approve the recommended policy change from press policy for board policy 6:230. Second.
Who's
Roll
the
call.
motion? I'm sorry.
Mr. Mankivsky.
Aye.
Mr. Kleisner.
Aye.
Mrs. Simmons.
Aye.
Mr. Cook.
Aye.
Mr. McCauley.
Aye.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Aye.
Dr. Lawler.
Aye.
Passes 7-0. Okay, so that is it for our new business. Okay, so let me get myself together here. So, next up is the superintendent and board report, Dr. Layton.
Yes, I have two primary updates I'd like to share. The first one is CAC this Thursday, and again, that's at the high school library. And Aaron not because he left, but Aaron truly volunteered to be the board member attending that meeting. So I'll just make sure I touch base with Aaron when he comes back. That just a reminder that he volunteered, and again, any other board members are welcome to come. The primary goal for that meeting is to review the candidate profile. Look at that. Candidate profile is what we use as we interview staff members or prospective teachers coming to the district of what we're looking for in an ideal candidate. Then the other pieces that I have are probably updates, as I talked with Katie earlier today, that she'll share as far as spring break, SIP day when we return. But the one other piece that I do want to note is our next meeting in April, or the April 29th meeting, is the organization meeting of the Board of Education. So at that meeting, we typically do three things. We approve our dates and times for the meetings for the upcoming school year, the 24-25 school year. Officers we would typically do, but we changed that policy to go with 2-year officers, so we don't need to do that. And then we also look at committee work. So the two things we would be looking at is committee work and also the dates and the times of the meeting. And I wanted to see from the board's perspective, as we had this meeting last year, there was a board question about changing the nights from Monday nights to a different night. And I believe it was Ryan Kleisner's, and so, or board member Kleisner. So I just wanted to see from the board if they want some research done in advance to see if Monday nights are still the recommendation, or if there's a different night that could work. Just know that with other nights, we have typically already built in the rhythm of a school year of CAC being on Thursdays. Foundation has been Wednesday. Tuesday night has other activities. So it could be problematic, but always willing to bring it back and do some research to see if the board is interested in a different night or time, what it might look like if the board's interested. So I don't know if that changed for you, Mr. Kleisner.
I'm still pretty interested in that because I think a big thing is community outreach and getting the community involvement. And I know we do have people that do come and participate, but it's usually over some of the bigger issues. I feel personally that we might have a little bit better draw if the board meetings were on a different night of the week. So if we can do a little bit of research on that to maybe validate some of my assumptions, that'd be cool. And if it doesn't work out for scheduling of all the other events and committees and everything else going on, I totally understand that too.
Okay, I can research that on the calendar of events. And we would want to make sure that we have that done at the next meeting, because as we get later into April and May, that's when we start planning out the calendar of events that families start to look forward to learning about. And then the other thing would be, I know with a previous board, due to work constraints, we always started at 7. Is there any interest for me to investigate what a 6 o'clock start would look like? Or I guess I should just say, do you guys want to consider a 6 o'clock start, or does that not work with work and travel? Or is there a logistical concern?
Sure. I mean, I would consider 6 just so, because our meetings go so long, we get out a little earlier, but
absolutely,
that's just my opinion.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay. And again, this isn't action. There's been no decision made on this. I can bring back more information at the April 8th board meeting. That was all I had for tonight. Thank you.
Dr. Fuchs?
I don't have anything, thank you.
All right, Ms. Katie.
Here, we did talk about CEC on Thursday. If you're still good for that. Yep. Thank you.
You were voluntold.
Good evening. Just last week, Kaneland High School hosted a career fair. Students had the opportunity to visit during their lunch periods. Not only did students get to explore the fair, but some got to assist at the company tables or help students walking around. For sports updates, boys track finished in 5th place at a meet hosted by Burlington Central, with seniors Evan N. and David V. running a 4-minute 21-second mile. And both of them broke our previous indoor school record, making them 3rd and 4th in school history. Unfortunately for us, boys varsity basketball fell to Crystal Lake South in the sectional final on Friday, March 1st. They ended their season with 26 wins and 6 losses, tying their number of wins from last year. As for recent club successes, Kaneland's DECA team recently competed at the state level. Seniors Alyssa A. and Tiffany J. were the only students who placed, with a finish in 8th place. Senior Kate Epps was also awarded a certificate for getting the highest score in her section for one of the categories. Also, Kaneland's Aces Club competed in sectionals, landing them a spot in their state competition. They did well, with senior Daniel N. being Kaneland's top performer, and then 4 other students took some medals. For upcoming dates, Mr. Kaneland is taking place on Friday, March 15th at 7 p.m. in the high school's auditorium. Mr. Kaneland is an annual mail pageant fundraiser, with proceeds going to the Kaneland Cares Fund. This year's theme is Barbie, and we have 7 Mr. Kaneland candidates. On Thursday, March 21st, there will be a jazz and percussion concert in the KHS auditorium at 7 p.m. Students will be off of school from Monday, March 25th to Monday, April 1st for spring break, with Monday, April 1st being a school improvement day. Thank you. That is all I have for tonight.
Thank you, Katie. Okay. On to that special time in the evening when we get to do public comment again. So, this is the second opportunity for public comment, keeping in mind the provisions listed before, with the caveat that we're going to stay hard at the 3 minutes. All right, first up, Sheila Obama.
My name is Sheila Albano. I am a Kaneland grad, Kaneland parent, Kaneland taxpayer. 3 generations of family through here. So as such, I would like, my mind is actually spinning after all the conversation that happened this evening. I'd like to say to the Kipla parents, I'm incredibly sorry for the situation that you find yourselves in. Unfortunately, that puts you at the back of the line of a long history of disappointed parents and upset kids in this district. When you're talking about the $200,000 for next year for your 9th grade, that money, regardless of what may have been thought of, does come from a pot of money for the entire district. So it comes from the educational whole pot. It comes from the building whole pot, comes from the transportation whole pot. So you are affecting all the school students of this district for the number that you have given. in the, simply just in the building part, given the situation in the high school and the problems we're going to have getting a referendum passed, if you're asking me as a taxpayer if I want to pay for extra classrooms or physical stuff for the very small number of KIPLA students versus new boilers for the entire high school, I'm going to pick the boilers. If you're going to ask me if I'm going to support better scientific science class equipment and more space for them, I'm going to pick them over your kids. And it is not because I don't think your kids don't deserve what they deserve. I do. But we've been told forever that the whole has to come before the small. And this is specifically the case with the track most recently, but I'm not up here to just talk about the track. If that's the case for everyone else and every other topic, it must remain the case for the KIPLA parents, as sad as that is. So it is really not about just the education and putting financial above education. That's the case for literally everything in front of you. So I hope that they can make it work where you can have a pilot program at the high school, which would then also include in all the other social things and the other options that they will not have if they stay in the KIPLA building. That to me makes more sense. Why none of this was worked out before you were ever brought into this situation is astonishment to me, because none of these things are not foreseeable. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Okay, and I just realized I skipped over topics for future agenda, so I'll do that after, if you guys don't mind filling out of order. Next up is Amy Corbett.
Hello, I'm Amy Corbett, a resident of Elburn, and my son is in 5th grade at Inspire. He's choosing on his own to remain at Ignite for 6th grade and Empower because, as Ronan, I know he's not here right now, shared, he feels at home and supported in his learning. Expectations coming into this meeting tonight, I thought that there truly was going to be a presentation with options that you would have to vote on. So hearing that it's kind of deferred and a new motion is made, I think it's just prolonging this a little bit more. Respectfully, I've never been under the impression that this was deemed a pilot program. As a couple of people have said here, our kids, our families have invested in the program, as have the KIPLA educators and staff for the long term. Not 1 year, especially as the kids that are in 8th grade are about to experience. This was meant to be a school that was formed and continued. Mr. McCauley, you had asked if it's an environment or the curriculum. It's the environment. Why was the minimum expectation for enrollment not based on the kids that initially signed up from the start? Because wouldn't you look kind of like at organic growth, something that you talked about at one of the previous meetings? You get people involved, they kind of grow with the program. You can't test something for just 1 year. You have a lot of things where you've got historical data of 3 to 5 years when you're talking about staffing and class sizes. If you have 100 to 150 kids in 3 through 8, how did we come to say that 50 would be the expectation for 9th grade in its first year? Personally, I think if you look at it and say 9th and 10th, you may get that number. Still feels uncertain that 9th and 10th will ever happen if it doesn't stop or start now. Mrs. Simmons, you said it comes across that these costs weren't considered when it makes me wonder if 9th through 12th was just a dream, you know, and enrollment could drop. I liked what you said, Mr. Cook, about it being you lose your initial investment. I don't know where my son will choose to complete high school, but as you had said, it's something that we would make an informed decision on, knowing what he may or may not have access to if he remained at KIPLA. But there's a lot of kids that KIPLA 9th and 12th is where they need to be. Something that I honestly was shocked at is when Dr. Atkins, no offense to you, but in just saying that there's staff members that may not be willing to teach these kids. When you get up here and you say that personalized learning is something for our entire district, to suggest that somebody isn't going to teach my child no matter where they're located, they need to look at their growth mindset. If you're gonna be in this district, you should be able to teach my child.
Thank you for your comments, Mrs. Corbett. All right, next up, Jennifer Crocker.
Jennifer Crocker, from Sugar Grove. I have an 8th grader at Kipla. A couple thoughts about tonight. I totally agree with what Amy said about the 50 students. I'm not gonna waste my time on that, but I completely agree with her. What we do next year doesn't have to be what we do the following year. So like if we sign our 9th graders up, you could always decide like, we signed up for this. We knew what we were getting into, that it would adapt with our kids. So if next year we decide to house it in the Kipla building and that doesn't work, by like November, we could be like, okay, let's explore moving into the high school. We don't have to stick with like, this is what we signed up for and our kids are totally up for it. So we're in for whatever adjustments need to be made. As far as the advertising goes, I know that on one of the slides, it said that there was a lot of advertising done. As a Kipla parent and in talking to other parents, a lot of the junior high kids have the impression that Kipla is where the bad kids go, that Kipla is where the special needs kids go. For this age group, you have to get the kids on board to make such a move, to walk away from to shift away from their friends. Even though like our Kipla 8th grade kids, they're still friends with all their other friends. They still go to the sports activities, the after school activities, all the extra stuff. But that's something that is spreading to other parents through us. So like my daughter's talking to her friends and telling them about how awesome it is. And they're like, oh, I'm gonna look into that. And that's how we're getting more kids for next year. It's not coming from admin in like, I know you're doing everything that you can to, you know, spread the word, but for this age group to get this cohort created, it's going to take time, you know, like for the parents to get on board with this new concept. It's harder for the older kids than it is for the younger ones. Also, you might get more 9th graders if once they find out that the 2 first periods would be at the high school. So they get to see some of their friends for part of the day and then not for the rest of the day. So they're not completely walking away from their friends. They're just seeing them for less time. Also, this was said to be an urgent decision in January and we're still here kicking the ball down the road. And admin has come twice now and said, we don't recommend this. They're going to come back again and say, we don't recommend this. What they need is direction from you, because if you say we're on board, then they'll figure out how to do it. So thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments. Okay. Jumping back one step, topics for future agenda. Anyone have anything they'd like to throw out there? Okay. Hearing none, we will proceed with closed session. The Board of Education is scheduled for a closed session to discuss the Illinois Open Meetings Act, Section 2C2, where there will be no action taken following the session. Therefore, after the vote to go into closed session, the recording of tonight's meeting will be concluded. I will, at this time, I'll entertain a motion to go into closed session to discuss Illinois Open Meeting Act 2C2 at 10:10 p.m.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Mankivsky.
Aye.
Mr. Kleisner.
Aye.
Mrs. Simmons.
Aye.
Mr. Cook.
Aye.
Mr. McCauley.
Aye.
Dr. Leller. Mr. Gonzalez.
Oh, I'm sorry.